Hello everyone. Welcome to another part of What If Issei Was in Love with Azathoth. If you enjoy, please like, subscribe and share. I did not write this story. The original writer is Akuma Kami 64. Please go and support them for more stories like these. Now let's dive in. Just keep going until you get to the other side of the barrier. You'll be in the train when you do. That's what Yog said. Still, no one had bothered to warn Issei that it would be like trying to walk through 3 feet of snow. It wasn't cold or anything, just thick, goopy. It was like the black void around him was somehow a form of ooze or slime, something he had to push and slog through to get anywhere. Not impossible. Not even difficult, not really. But it made everything feel slow. He tried to call out to Drag or Gaktha, but he couldn't speak. There was no air. And he didn't know how to use telepathy or anything yet. He could still feel Drag's presence and faintly see Gaktha, but that was it. He was eldritch enough to make it through this unharmed, but still too human for it to be easy. How long had they gone on? Hours? Days, maybe? Minutes. It's been only minutes. Issei blinked. Had he thought that? It sounded like his thoughts, but how did he know that? How could he be sure? He didn't know, he didn't care, he just gritted his teeth and drudged on through the shield. The shield trying to keep him out. Trying, and failing. With a great shattering noise, they suddenly emerged into reality again with Issei stumbling forward before he came to lean on a wall and steady himself. Geez, is this what astronauts feel like? He asked himself, suddenly having the sensation that he had been weightless just a moment ago. Well, just like Yog said, it's a train, he mused, looking at the door to a train compartment. With that, he looked back at Gaktha, who was already standing there, ready for his next move as the shattered barrier behind them slowly pieced itself back together. The priestess of Azathoth nodded to her master. Issei took a deep breath, Drag's gauntlet forming on his arm. Calm yourself, Issei, and trust your instincts, Drag cautioned. I'll keep that in mind. Just tell me if you know anything important about whatever we're fighting, Issei requested, getting a hum of confirmation. With that done, he reached forth and opened the door. The sound of battle echoed in his ears. Lightning leapt from Akino's fingertips. Swords broke in Kiba's hands only to be replaced by another. Kaneko fought like a vicious, terrified animal. Bats swarmed around them, causing their enemies to freeze as if paralyzed. There were about a half-dozen other girls that Issei didn't know, but looked familiar as they cast off their own attacks. There was another guy as well, using some kind of blue magic whip to attack and hold their foes off. Killed, killing, kill them. Suffered, suffering to the winged ones. Said foes were definitely eldritch. They were like pears with 5 legs around their base, and the top have long whips or tentacles with spikes on them. Each was only the size of a person, but there were dozens of them, having torn away the roof and walls of the train cabin. Though the devils were holding strong, they were backed against the other side, many of them bloodied and wounded as the eldritch circled in front and above them. Some of them looked close to terrified, especially Kaneko. Hey, uglies! Issei yelled at the sightless creatures. Issei? Akino said in shock as Issei caught a tendril with his armored hand. Issei yanked, making the creature stumble back and let out a mouthless scream as blood came out from the base of the tentacle. Gaktha, can you deal with the rest outside? Yes, I can. Be safe, master, Gaktha answered simply, her form cloaked in shadow and mist as she leaped into the air, taking flight to thwart off those crawling all over the train. Issei kept his focus on the ones in front of him, heaving his arms up and slamming them down, sending a wave through the tendril that bounced the creature off its feet. Akino took the chance to fry it with lightning. Another tried to take her hand, but Kiba was able to cut off the attacking leg. Who dares to thwart our punishing of these wretched? One of the creatures demanded, seeming at Issei. Friend of theirs, so you're on my list now, Issei said in warning. You can leave if you want though. Go for the legs, Drag whispered. Those limbs are weak and these things start panicking if they can't stand up. Got it, Issei acknowledged under his breath. The creature screeched, leaping at him with speed that he would have deemed impossible before Aza. It started to feel very slow to Issei. He couldn't move that fast himself, but he could see it coming now. Just as they would have barreled him over, he leaped up, kicking one in the side and sending it tumbling back. He came down, landing a dragon fist on the knee of another Perdrich. It let out a horrible noise as the limb broke clean off in a spray of green blood. Another tried to grab Issei from behind with the many-fingered ends of their limbs, but he managed to barely wrestle it off of him, turning around and twisting the hand with disturbing ease. He inhaled sharply as a tendril almost got around his throat before it froze for some reason. Ducking away, he turned to see Kaneko on top of the beast, ripping the offending tendril out as bats flew around her. "Are you okay?" a voice came from the bats. Not one of them, but all of them at once. That was the least surprising thing he had seen in a week if he was honest. Yeah. Thanks for the save," Issei said, offering a thumbs up and getting a nod from Kaneko, clearly less unnerved now. With that, he struck at the creature's legs before taking a glance at the others. They weren't having as easy a time damaging the creatures, but they were going for the legs now, slowly whittling away at their foes until they were mostly rolling on the ground like dropped oranges. Someone screamed. One fell from above and snatched at a white-haired girl, one who wasn't Kaneko, and began twisting her arm. If she had been human, her arm would have already been ripped off. "Drag, give me some boosts," Issei called, his speed and strength increasing suddenly as the boosted gear's power flowed through him. He rushed the eldritch, his gauntlet pulled back in a fist, delivering a mighty punch. The beast screeched as the impact ripped through its body, a gory hole bursting out the other end as it slumped over in death. The green blood sprayed over Issei's arm. He pushed his distaste aside as he looked down at the she-devil. "You okay?" "Ygaya." "Thanks," she said awkwardly as she got to her feet, holding her arm in pain. Issei looked back and saw that with what limbs they still had, the injured creatures began to crawl away into their own shadows, disappearing from sight. "Okay. Everyone alive?" Issei called out as he caught his breath, looking around for any stragglers. "Thanks to you, yes," Akino said gratefully. "Issei Hayadu, I take it," another said, with long hair and glasses. Issei stared, recognizing her but taking a moment to put a name to the face. "That's me. Tsubaki, the student vice-pres, right?" She nodded stoically, before bowing respectfully. "Thank you for your aid, Lord Hayadu." "Guess I'm going to have to get used to that," Issei murmured awkwardly. "You should be groveling, bat-winged worms." Issei almost groaned at Gaktha's tone, hearing her descend behind him, making all the devils tense. "Everyone ignore her. She's with me," Issei requested, turning to Gaktha. "Gaktha, did you the fuck?" Issei turned fully in surprise. In place of the unnerving young woman was now, a very sexy, very alien woman. Her skin was an impossibly pale gray. She was clad in a black material that appeared like cloth in some spaces, like armor in others, and fully part of her body regardless. Her eyes were covered by what could be a horned helmet, or it might simply be part of her body. Her luscious breasts were on full display, concealed not by cloth or armor, with only the nipples covered by pieces of the black material, acting more like pasties than anything. "Gaktha? That you?" Issei asked in surprise. "My form unhidden, master," she answered, falling to one knee. "The Lashans have been disposed of, dead or subdued. What are your orders, master?" "Right, just going to have to ignore this for now," Issei decided as he turned back to the devils, giving them a once-over before frowning. "Please tell me Rias and Sona went ahead of you guys?" At their looks, he knew they hadn't. "They were in the compartment behind us, but we can't get through to it," Kiba informed, motioning to the door. It was already opened, now that Issei looked, but showed only a solid blackness. Issei raised an eyebrow as he walked over, reaching out to the emptiness only to reach a barrier. "The hell? Gaktha, is this just the way out or something?" The eldritch woman approached in an instant, the devils giving her a wide berth, which she ignored as she reached the blackness. "Master, it is another pocket realm." "In this pocket realm?" Issei asked incredulously, sighing as she nodded. "Great. Poxception. Just, make sure we can get through without anything exploding. Air, or imploding. Any kind of plotting." "As you wish, master," Gaktha answered. Issei shivered a bit at having such a beautiful and otherworldly woman calling him master, but pushed his libido aside as he turned to face a train full of teenage devils. Scared, relieved, but also very confused. Akino and Tsubaki approached him, Akino more serious than usual. "Not that we're not grateful, Issei, but why are you here? What's going on?" Akino asked as neutrally as possible. Issei rubbed the back of his neck. "It's not Aza or a war or whatever you're imagining," Issei said with a frown. "One of the Eldritch decided to stir up trouble and decided that you were all a good way to do it." "I'd ask their name if I didn't value my sanity," Tsubaki remarked. "How bad is this?" "Well, they made this pocket space around your train so that outer gods like Aza couldn't just will it away without killing everyone inside," Issei elaborated, making them stiffen. As they talked, the others watched on. So, that's Issei? Sanji remarked with his arms crossed. The guy that is supposed to be dating this Azadash? Gaktha's head snapped like an owl to stare at Sanji. A hand came over his mouth at the same time, prompting the Eldritch to return to her study of the barrier. Don't say her name, idiot. Tomo said quickly. Sorry, I just really don't get this forbidden name stuff, Sanji said with a grimace. Why is he here though? I'm glad he is, and so is my arm, Momo said, nursing her wounded appendage. You okay? Anything broken? Kiba inquired as he approached her. Momo shook her head. No, I don't think so. Just sprained. No offense, Kiba, but shouldn't you be looking out for your own right now? Sanji remarked, nodding to the seats on the other side of the train. The swordsman followed his gaze and saw Gasper curled up in front of the seats, holding the ruined remains of his box. Kaneko was kneeling on the seat, watching Issei with a hawk-like focus. Kiba was concerned for the vampire, but Kaneko? He was surprised by how good she was doing. If anything, she was doing better than even before the attack happened. Master, Gaktha spoke up, cutting them all off. The source of both barriers is within the second pocket realm. Of course, Issei said under his breath, not even surprised. Can we get in? Yes, Master, Gaktha answered, turning to rise with unnatural grace. But they cannot. What? Tsubaki asked with a scowl, others voicing their discontent at being unable to help their mistresses. I almost expected that, Issei admitted. Does this complicate things? No, Master, Gaktha confirmed. But it will only allow one Eldritch to enter. Any more, and both fields will fail and kill them all. Does that mean we're going to die either way? Kaneko asked with a blunt scowl. Gaktha glanced eyelessly towards the Nico devil before looking to Issei again, who was giving her a questioning look. No, Master. They should survive if the source is dealt with. Well, I'm getting the feeling she's calling me out on purpose with this setup, Issei murmured with a head shake. Gaktha, stay here. Master, it would be better for me to deal with this, Gaktha insisted. Mistress would not want you to risk your form. Gaktha, if you happen to lose over there, they'll all die. I don't know how to make a shield or anything against the barrier collapsing, except maybe trying to punch it, Issei countered forcefully. You can at least get them back to Earth, right? Master, that is not Gaktha started, only for Issei to step closer to her with a stern look. Can you or not? He asked pointedly. Yes, I might be able to, Gaktha answered slowly. Better than nothing, Issei decided. Is there a reason you're risking your life for us? Issei turned to see Akino approaching him curiously. Or is this just out of the kindness of your heart too? She asked with an interested twinkle in her eye. No, and yes, Issei answered with a shrug. I helped Kaneko because I felt bad for her. I'm doing this because I want to help. Do you know what's through there? Akino asked carefully. Not a clue, Issei admitted bluntly. Akino nodded before leaning into his ear. Bring them back safe, and I'll. Issei flushed as he heard Akino's rather descriptive offer before coughing. You'd have to fight Aza for that, we haven't done that yet. Akino raised both eyebrows at that. But you have done the deed, with her? Yes, we Issei answered, trying not to sound too smug. Akino could only stare in uncomprehending amazement. If you're both done being pervs. Issei's eyes shot down to look at Kaneko, staring up at him. How much of what she said Every word, Kaneko said, giving Akino a sideways look, eliciting a giggle. Thank you, for coming. With that, Kaneko hugged Issei. It was brief, it was quick, and then she pulled herself away and walked away. Okay, that happened, Issei remarked in surprise as he stared at Kaneko's back before shaking his head free. I should get going. No telling what's happening to those two. Don't sell them short, Akino said with a small smile. Wouldn't dream of it, Issei said, turning with a wave. I'll try to make this quick. With that, he turned to head to the barrier, pausing to stand near Gaktha. Are you sure about this, Master? She asked with a frown upon her lips. About as sure as I am that this form of yours is hot and I'd like to see it more often, Issei remarked. Just, if something happens to me? Try to get them back, and don't let Azamine break them. Gaktha tilted her head ever so minutely. Right, I'll rephrase, making sure she knows I don't want her to before letting her, Issei corrected in amusement. That much I can do, Master, Gaktha accepted with a bow of the head. Please hurry back. Mistress will be displeased if you are not sharing a bed tonight. Issei smiled at that. If that wasn't motivation to make it out of this with his body intact, nothing was. With a deep breath, he pushed through the barrier and instantly found himself on the other side, facing the door to another train cart. Issei frowned at the ease of that. Definitely calling me Dash. He was interrupted as half of the door and the wall next to it exploded in a red glow, causing him to jump against the opposite wall. Out, he said, pushing the remains of the door aside to peek inside. There was a woman with wings for arms and talons for legs, wearing clothing that appeared to be her own feathers stabbed into her body. In front of her were Rias and Sona, both injured with parts of their clothes destroyed. Sona's stomach was exposed, her skirt barely holding together, while Rias had one of her beautiful breasts on full display. Both were breathing heavily, clearly exhausted. A sight Issei would have enjoyed normally, if not for the blood and danger involved. The great she cannot be denied, princesses of devils, the harpyish woman said ominously, raising her wings, the feathers forming into dark hands, an otherworldly energy forming between them into a ball. Okay, yeah, no, Issei decided, holding up the boosted gear, feeling the power drawing into it. Red energy swirled around Rias, only for both she-devils to become surprised as a green energy ball launched into their opponent's unfinished attack, causing it to explode prematurely. The dark harpy, unfazed by her own attack, turns to glance at the newcomer. Issei? Rias called out in surprise. You're? Sorry I'm late, Issei said as he walked in, trying to act more confident than he was sure he should feel. I take it you're working for the gnarly? Bold and foolish to call the great she as such, the dark harpy said idly. Who are you? If I told you I'm dating the queen of the Eldritch, would you give up? Issei offered with a shrug. The silence he received was answer enough. Didn't think so, Issei said with a sigh. Who are you, anyway? My name is Gon. I am only a servant of the great she. You may call me Dash. Her introduction was interrupted by a wave of destructive red energy, aimed at her head by Rias. She raised one arm, the feathers of the wing acting as a shield as the power exploded. The Avratress, she finished, scowling at the devils. I have not forgotten you are here, sisters of the Satans. Shame, Sona said, a blue magic symbol forming in front of her outstretched hand, sending out a burst of water in the form of snakes, ensnaring and biting into one of the legs. Avratress didn't even flinch, pulling her leg free and spinning to catch a punch from Issei with her talons. Worth a shot, Issei murmured as the claws held steadfast to his arm. Was it? Avratress asked, her right arm shifting and changing to form a large, tooth mouth along the span of the wing. Shit! Issei cursed, grateful as a boost from Drag kicked in, giving him a chance to kick up at the leg holding in, a sickening crack sounding off before he was released. But before he could get away, the teeth of the wingmaw came down and sliced into his right arm, leaving a deep and bloody gash. With a hiss of pain, he leaped away, joining Rias and Sona on their side of the cart. Are you okay? Rias asked with a frown, her hand raised, ready to cast another attack if and when needed. Before Issei could answer, the bleeding stopped and formed a long, narrow spike, crystallized in appearance, blazing orange in color. And most surprising of all, the sharp and burning pain in his arm was gone. Apparently, he answered in surprise. His attention returned to Avratress in full as she snapped her leg back in place, her wings still chomping at the air as she gazed at them. Well, that didn't work. Any ideas? Issei asked idly as he got to his feet again. We've been doing everything to hold her off until now, Rias answered with a frown. Rias's powers have more of an effect than mine, Sona informed, glancing to the floor where many scorched and discarded feathers lay. But she seems to recover from everything. Yeah, well, thanks to how she set this trap up, we're on our own, Issei warned in advance. You could always give in, Avratress offered hollowly. It would be easier for you to accept what will happen. How encouraging, Rias said derisively. Issei stared intently at Avratress, for once completely ignoring his perversion as he looked at such a scantily clad woman, mostly because she might just kill him if he wasn't careful. Still, how did they stop here? Just keep hitting her until she didn't get back up? There had to be some weak points. There. Issei stilled at the voice in his head, glancing down at Drag. That you? Drag made a noise of confusion, answering Issei's own question. Looking back at the Avratress, he felt his eyes drawn to her stomach, a space right above the womb. He could feel it more than see it, some thing there, her eldritch heart perhaps? Or the source of her power. He didn't know. Just that he had a target. Stab her there. His gaze drifted back to his arm and his newly grown spike. Well, if you want the cub, enter the cave, he muttered, flexing his gauntlet. Ladies, I have an idea. Just try to give me some cover. You sure? Sona asked skeptically. It's worth a shot, Issei answered casually. Don't worry about us, Rias assured, her ruinous power flaring. Make peace with your souls, before they are extinguished, Avratris warned as she held her arms up, and sped towards the trio. All at once, the she-devils let loose attacks of crimson and azure, barreling toward their enemy, but Avratris did not slow, her more normal wing raised to shield her as her charge continued. Sensing him before she saw him, Avratris hurled her mawing arm out to bite at Issei, attempting to hit him from the side. Not happening, Sona said, her water serpent shooting forth to grab the toothy limb, pulling it back. Avratris frowned, her first facial reaction, before launching out her legs. Issei gritted his teeth, holding back a scream of pain as he felt the talons stabbing into his lower leg, feeling like she was about to rip his shinbone. Actually, that was probably exactly what she would do if he gave her the chance, he realized. Still, there was little to do as he fell to one knee. Give in, and I'll make it quick, Avratris offered coldly. Oh, Jay, just fuck off, Issei muttered through the pain as he reached up to the spike in his shoulder. Avratris eyed him strangely as Issei slumped over and. The gauntlet glowed green for a moment, power flowing into the spike before it suddenly expanded, stabbing into Avratris' stomach and hitting the mark. Gah! She gasped out wordlessly as blood poured through her mouth and wound. Issei grunted as he snapped the spike off at his shoulder, leaving it stabbed through Avratris. Her leg slowly, tremblingly released his, blood rushing from Issei's injuries before quickly sealing in a red mesh. Avratris stumped backward, falling to her knees, reaching for the improvised weapon, the ichor spike beginning to fill with a twisted blackness. She made to pull it out. Until she was surrounded by red symbols. Issei, move! Rias called out in warning. Moving. Issei acknowledged, using his one good leg and all the strength being a budding eldritch afforded him, landing outside of the area of attack. Between her wound and Sona keeping her pinned, Avratris seemed to have no such chance. But as she was enveloped by the red power of Rias's ruin, Issei swore he saw the harpy give a small, broken smile before she was engulfed. As Issei slowly awoke, he smiled at the familiar and welcoming feeling of Aza lying on top of him. He didn't need to look, he'd know her body anywhere at this point. But he blinked himself awake as realized there was a second body, one that definitely wasn't Aza pulling some self-replicating ability to give him a twin Aza experience. Looking down at his left side, he stared at the long rivers of blonde hair before realizing that Asia was laying there, hugging his arm. Eyes shifting around the unfamiliar room, he realized he wasn't in his own bed either. Everything started to come back to him now. The train, the harpy, saving Rias and Sona, and then the flash of light. Well, I guess I pulled that off, Issei murmured to himself with a small smile, using his right arm to come up and run his hands through Aza's hair. Indeed you did, Lord Issei. Issei's eyes shot downward, to the foot of the bed. Laying there was one Aika, still blindfolded and positioned much like a dog at the feet of her sleeping master. Aika. Where are we and what are you doing? He asked with a raised eyebrow. Some bedroom in the occult clubhouse. And this was my reward for helping you come home, she answered, sitting up and starting to stretch. I normally would say serving is reward enough, but getting to sleep at the feet of my gods? How could any good bitch refuse that? Aika asked with a smirk. I'm not going to argue with that logic, Issei answered awkwardly. Because you enjoy the idea of having a pet girl leashed to your bedpost, right, my lord? Aika asked with a grin. Yes, but that's beside the point, Issei deflected, feeling himself growing aroused, his erection almost poking Aza's belly. How long have I been asleep? Just a few hours, Aika answered, crawling up and revealing her shirt was unbuttoned to reveal her pink bra underneath. Issei raised an eyebrow but merely watched as she leaned over Asia's sleeping form, staring at her through the fabric over her eyes. Brave little thing. Your nun's been in a trance since you got back, healing you. Was I that beat up? Issei asked in surprise. You were growing a third arm there for a moment, Aika answered before smiling perversely. Or, fourth arm to be accurate. Issei rolled his eyebrows as he looked down at Asia, realizing for the first time he could hear her mumbling in her sleep. What's she saying? Prayers, Aika answered, looking very amused as she pushed a strand of Asia's long hair behind the ear. Mostly from the Bible, but some eldritch ones have been slipping through. I doubt she even realizes it. We're passively brainwashing her? Issei asked idly. I don't think so, Aika answered with a hum. I think her faith is just slowly moving to you and Aza. Still weird to think about, Issei mused. Where is everyone else? Don't worry about that. Issei gave a small smirk as he looked down at Aza. Thought you were awake. Let's just lay here for another week or two, Aza said in a sleepy voice, her hair melding with the bed. You saved the devils and kicked Nireli's bird. That's enough for now, right? You do remember about school, right? Issei reminded Riley. Aza grumbled something that, while adorable, Issei was certain was an otherworldly curse. Fine, fine, she said, sitting up and stretching, tugging her hair out of the bed. Should I get you anything, oh great centaur? Aika asked, bowing her head low to Aza. You brought me back my issei, I'm good, Aza waved off, hugging onto his side. Where is Yog? She's late for once. At that cue, there was a knock at the door, to everyone's surprise. Sharing a look with everyone, Issei shrugged and called out to the door. Come in. In walked an eldritch of time, but it was not Yog. Instead, it was Yad, who walked up to the bed with a stoic expression. Unlike Yog, I have manners, Yad explained simply. We decided to switch for now, in case any of the Satans are suddenly trigger-happy. Ah. That means she took Rias and everyone home while I was asleep? Issei asked with a raised eyebrow. Not exactly, Aza answered, snuggling into his shoulder. There were 2 pocket realms, weren't there? Yes? Issei answered with a raised eyebrow. Rias Gremory and Sona Citri were pulled back here with you, Yad explained. But the rest of the devils were not. Issei glanced around, trying to get a read on everyone. They're not dead, right? No, Aza answered, waving him off, and he was sure her hands were flippers for a moment. If they were, Gaktha would be hurt or dead too. She's fine, so they should be too. Hence why Lady Yog is searching hell and the neighboring realms, Aika commented demurely. It's where they most likely are. Well, that's not great, but good at least, Issei decided, knowing it was better than it could have been. Aza? Are you okay? Your form's shifting more than normal. Well, you know, normal for when we're not doing it. You mean doing me, Aza countered, brushing her arm to turn scales back into skin. It's high emotions in general. I've gone from worried senseless to incredibly happy, so my form is a bit less stable than I'd like. Right, sorry, Issei said in apology. So, how are Rias and Sona doing? Sleeping, Yad answered, nodding to Asia. Thanks to some non-Euclidean magic, she's able to heal all 3 of you at once. Wait, I thought I wasn't in that bad of a shape. Why didn't she just heal them first? Issei asked curiously. Aika and Yad both looked at Aza pointedly. Ah, right, stupid question. She's your healer, not theirs, Aza said simply. So, you get priority. Don't worry, I could have kept them in a temporal stasis if needed, Yad assured. I'm currently hoping that Yog locates their servants before they wake up. What do we do if they're not in hell though? Issei asked with a frown. Do we have to worry about that now? Aza asked with a grumble, arms crossed, all 6 of them. Actually, my queen, this might be to your liking, Yad stated, getting blinking eyes from the queen. If they're not in hell, they were flung to the Ajit Sun. The Ajit Sun? Aza suddenly had a very wide and happy smile. I'm slightly concerned, Issei said, despite his fond smile. Oh, nothing. It's just, I might have an excuse to take us on our first date to another planet. Aza exclaimed with a pleased tone. Meanwhile, Sona awoke, eyes opening suddenly. Her mind calmed as she saw the familiar ceiling and walls of Rias's clubhouse. More specifically, the private room Rias had there. Guess we made it back safe, even if it wasn't where we wanted to be, she said as she sat up and immediately realized 2 things. 1, Rias was sleeping on the other side of the bed. 2, they were both in their underwear. Well, this brings back memories, she remarked with a brief smile, recalling their sleepovers as children. Glancing around more, she found there were 2 pairs of uniforms at the edge of the bed. As she rose to get dressed, her fellow devil began to stir. Aquino, is that you? Rias murmured as she eased her eyes open. Off by a lot, Sona answered, fixing on her skirt. Sona? What dash? Rias stopped, sitting straight up. The train. The harpy and Issei. We survived? Evidently, seeing as we're back at Kuo, Sona pointed out, finishing her clothes. So we are, Rias said, finding her clothes and putting on her top first. Any idea what happened after the fight? If everyone is all right? I just woke up, we both have the same information, Sona explained, glancing at the door. I suppose we should see if our saviors can tell us anything. It's been a while since I've seen you without glasses, Rias commented idly, standing to finish her clothing. Pretty sure they were destroyed back in the train. It's not an issue, Sona remarked, both of them knowing she had no actual sight impairment. That wasn't to say she didn't have to resist the urge to push up glasses she no longer had. With both dressed, they cautiously made it out of the room in search of the eldritch. It felt so strange being on guard in Rias's place of power, but there was no telling just what eldritch was here. Coming to the meeting room, they both shared a look at the door before opening it. Bugs. Seriously, why are so many eldritch bug-based? I thought tentacles were the main thing. Issei asked in bewilderment. I think that might have been my doing, Aza said thoughtfully, finger to her chin. One of the only races I designed were insect-based. Ah, I miss my Shans and Zada. The room got extremely heavy, dark, and gloomy as the Eldritch Queen suddenly underwent a mild bout of depression. Rias and Sona nearly doubled over as they felt the worry in the back of their hearts grow into a stabbing pain, the uncertainty of not knowing what happened to their servants becoming a true fear of their deaths. Hey, you okay? Issei asked in concern, placing a hand on Aza's shoulder, having no idea what she was talking about other than it made her sad. Azathoth sighed in contentment and happiness as she soaked in Issei's presence. Yeah, just bad memories. Story for another time. That would be wise, given our company, Yad remarked, glancing to the door and causing all parties to look at it. Rias and Sona steadied themselves as the feeling left, leaving them uneasy as they took in the scene in full. Issei was sitting on the couch. On one side sit a blonde girl who, during Aza's wave of sadness, had clung to Issei's left arm for comfort. She was looking at them with a polite smile. Standing next to the couch was a girl in a medieval-styled outfit, complete with a European sword. But the one to Issei's right was the one that had their attention. They had seen her before, they knew exactly who and what she was. But feeling it was a whole other ordeal. Rias swallowed thickly, fully understanding how Kaneko had nearly lost her mind from just being near this woman. You're both up. That's a relief, Issei greeted as he stood. Are both of you okay? We're fine, Sona assured, trying not to glance at Aza, let alone make eye contact. Thank you. For saving us, your majesties. Please, you two were holding her back pretty well before I got there, Issei said humbly. I'm just glad I didn't make an utter ass of myself in that fight. Yes, but who, and what was that exactly, if you don't mind us asking? Rias asked delicately. Some unlucky soul the crawling chaos found, Yad informed as she stepped forward. To answer what you're wondering, I am Yad. I am an elder god with Yog-Sothoth. Yog-So-? Sona stopped herself before saying the name as she schooled her expression. I see. And the blonde girl is indeed human and she belongs to the Sultana and Sultan, Yad continued. Hello, nice to meet you, Asia said as she approached the devil. I'm Asia Argento. You as well, but, belongs? Rias asked curiously, raising an eyebrow at Issei. Is she a cultist or? Personal healer, more like. Long story. She also healed up you both, Issei explained. Oh. Thank you then, Rias said thankfully, Sona nodding in agreement. Not to sound rude, but where is everyone else? Or was it just our part of the train? No, but don't worry, everybody was alive before I went to help you too, Issei explained reassuringly. As for where, we're still figuring that out. Both devils raised an eyebrow at that but barely suppressed their tensing bodies as Aza stood up to join the conversation. They're alive, but they didn't get pulled back here with Issei. Yog is checking around your home realm first. Thank you, Queen of the Eldritch, Sona said tactfully. We appreciate your continued aid in this matter. My beloved insisted on helping you, and he doesn't like to leave anything half-finished, Aza said, giggling as she leaned on his arm. Anything. Rias and Sona both relaxed, more in surprise than anything, as they felt the warping reality around Aza brushing up to Issei, almost like her very power was nuzzling or cuddling with him. You know it, Issei said with a grin, his hand reached up and patted Aza on the head, making her beam. You just head-patted Azathoth, Rias said slowly, before quickly covering her in mouth in surprise. I'm sorry, that just slipped out, she apologized, hoping that there wasn't any consequence for saying Aza's full name in her presence. For what? Yes, he gave me a head pat. You humans have such interesting forms of affection, Aza said, before reaching up to kiss Issei on the cheek. I still like these ways more though. So do I, Issei said, reaching down and stealing a kiss off her lips. If she still had them, Sona would have dropped her glasses as she watched Aza swoon. It was surreal, watching something so off the scale as Azathoth giggling and stealing kisses with Issei. Yad cleared her throat, making Issei flush with a sheepish look. Sorry about that, we got a little carried away. We're used to Yog always popping in, so we learned to ignore having an audience. For once, I believe that sounded more perverted than you meant, Rias remarked, relaxing some with a small smile on her face. Would it be all right if we contacted our families? I'm sure they're confused and worried by now. You may want to wait, Yad remarked, glancing at the door. We should have company in a moment. Company? Issei asked, all looking towards the entrance in anticipation. You mean Yog? Yad remained silent, unable or unwilling to answer. Issei felt it before he saw it, the cracks forming in reality, manifesting as literal cracks of dark light forming on the door. He glanced at Aza, who didn't look worried or concerned in the slightest. So, he took that as a sign that whoever this was, they didn't mean trouble. The door imploded into a swirling vortex of shadows and darkness. Rias and Sona inhaled sharply as they were assaulted by the image of something, a huge plumbing mass of tentacles, the vaguest shape of a goat's head, and an unsettling glow from within as a silhouette came forth. And a mop of white hair popped out, revealing the head of a woman with a strangely adorable pair of curled horns on the sides of her head, one arm on the wall as if she was peeking from around the corner. Oh no, Drake whispered in Issei's head. I am not here. I am not here. Shubby. Aza greeted with a wide grin, raising her arms, and they extended just a bit too far to be normal. I thought that was you, I sensed. Aza, Shubby, greeted with a smile. Sorry to interrupt your honeymoon, but are you by chance missing a dozen or so of? She paused and pointed to Rias and Sona, whatever they are? Devils. And yes, we are, Yad answered. Shub looked at her, causing Yad to look away. Hello, Shub Nigirath. Oh, Yad. I thought you were Yog for a moment, Shub said softly. She was in the underworld, looking for the ones you found, Yad answered quietly. Of course she was, Shub said in disappointment, seemingly speaking of something else, before returning her attention to Aza. Would you mind coming over here? They're being stingy about releasing them. Stingy? Sono questione skepticali. More like bureaucratic, Yad supplied. We'll be there in a moment, Shub. We will? Issei asked curiously. Most of us, Aza said, glancing at Asia. She can't come, it's too early for her to be in a place like this. It's all right, Aza, Issei. I had some plans after this anyway, Asia assured softly. Oh? Issei asked curiously. Well, I'm not confident I'll ever become a cultist, but I think I do need to learn more about them and the Eldritch, Asia answered with a bashful smile. That you do. Some of them make your crusaders look like pacifists, Aza said wisely. You actually know about the Crusades? Issei asked, almost mildly surprised. Oh yeah, all Eldritch do. You have no idea how many knights got tricked into worshipping some of us, Aza said in exasperation. You make that sound like a bad thing for you, your majesty? Sona asked cautiously. It involved certain Eldritch having a proxy war with each other's cultists, Yad explained in annoyance. It was, in a word, a mess. Sounds like it, Issei mused. Still, history fun facts aside, shall we? All parties began to head to the portal, albeit with some unease on Sona and Rias's part. Do not worry, Yad remarked to them. It's safe for devil minds, just not humans. It wasn't our minds we were worried about, Rias said idly. But thank you. With that, Issei and Aza stepped through the portal, followed by the devil duo. He wasn't sure what did he find on the other side. Are we, in a hospital? Rias asked curiously as she looked around the waiting room. I doubt it's just that, Sona stated knowingly, looking at the nurses and doctors walking about, acting as if they hadn't noticed their sudden arrival. Eh? That what you see? Issei asked curiously. You don't? Rias asked with a raised eyebrow. Give it a moment. The Eldritch camouflage will wear off in a few seconds, Yad answered stoically. True to her word, the world around Sona and Rias warped and melted away. Instead of a waiting room, they were in what looked more like a hive for giant bugs. Halls were replaced by winding tubes not only in the walls but in the ceiling and floor. The material was red and brown, looking like something between organic and rock. Littered over the surfaces were beige crystals that gently lit the areas in an off-color hue. More importantly, the medic personnel all faded away to be replaced by giant insects that looked like the strange offspring of fireflies and cockroaches, their low-hanging rears immersing a soft glow as their rearmost legs kept them standing with a mix of coordination and balance. Their other four limbs had many more joints, allowing them to turn and reach in any direction. Their heads were smooth and had a strange adorableness about them for how their many eyes fit into their heads, their antennae moving where their mouths did not. Sona and Rias stared, almost surprised by how tame this was, all things considered. There you all are, Shub called out, approaching them with one of the creatures, who had 4 antennae instead of 2. Aza, I'm sure you know Thunsathatha, she said, waving to the creature, who bowed its head as its antennae shook. Greetings great Azathoth, Yad of Yog, devils of earth, Thunsa greeted, the melodic voice echoing soothingly in their minds. The many-eye orbs moved to focus on Issei, Lord of Azathoth. Sona and Rias looked to Issei with confusion at that rather lofty and confusing title. Jo, Isagriti. We're here for Gaktha and the devils that were brought here? Thunsa nodded eagerly. This is good. We do not wish for underserving to be here. But apologizes, great Azathoth, insistences must be made by the proper scripture. I don't suppose you'd allow me to just will the finished paperwork into existence? Aza asked with a sigh. Insistence must be made, for such things are often tried by those already within, Thunsa answered apologetically. Azathoth sighed. Very well. Yad, come and help me write faster. They should at least allow that. Issei, I'll be a minute. You mind keeping Shubby company until I'm done? Aza asked with a resigned smile. I'd offer to help, but I'm pretty sure I need to learn a new language. Issei paused to look at the roachfly creature. And probably a new form of communication to even try. These are words that are not false, Thunsa confirmed. Please be at ease and remain nowhere else. The devils watched as Yad and Aza walked over to a tunnel in the ground, stepping casually over the edge and falling down it. Thunsa, however, opened their wings and took to the air, flying into one of the upper paths. With that, Shub awkwardly approached the group. I suppose this is the first time we've met, Shub said, smiling up at Issei. Only now, seeing her with her brown shirt and the white apron over it, did they realize how short her human form was. Not to the point of being considered a dwarf, but she would barely be taller than Kaneko, Rias noted. I'm Shupni Gurat. We've been told. It's a pleasure to meet you, Rias said carefully. Oh, don't worry. I understand we outer gods are intimidating, Shub said reassuringly. I take no offense, but please be at ease. No one here means you any harm. Right. All the same, I'm sorry. I'm Rias Gremory, and this is Sona Citri, Rias introduced. Gremory, Citri. Important names, I believe, but I'm sorry to say I don't know much beyond that, Shub mused before looking to Issei. Sona and Rias nearly fell over as they watched Shub Nigurath, the black goat of 1,000 young, bowed her head deeply to Issei Hayadu. It's a pleasure to meet you, Lord Issei, Shub said with a smile. Please, stop, Issei said with a bashful grin as he waved her off. I'm just Aza's boyfriend. Regardless, it's nice to meet the one that makes Aza so happy, she said genuinely. It's been so long since I've seen her like this. I'm amazed that she learned how to take human form so fast too. Issei blushed a bit under the praise. Well, anyway, thanks for helping with this. Though, how did you get mixed up in all this anyway? Oh. It's nothing special really, Shub answered idly. I was nearby and sensed something being hurled between realms, rather unsafely. I made sure they got here in one piece, but when they arrived, the Blatnungs were just as confused as me. We found one of Aza's Warnuns dash. Rias and Sona did a double take at the term Warnuns, but Issei and Shub took no notice. Who said that you, Kungur, tasked her with protecting them, Shub finished. Thanks, glad to know we had someone higher up looking out for them, Issei thanked. Yes, truly, thank you, Sona said with sincerity. But may we ask where this is, exactly? According to Aza, in the Eye of Jupiter, Issei answered bluntly, obviously still amazed by that prospect as he looked around. First time off planet? Shub asked playfully. Issei could only rub the back of his head boyishly. Rias knew she was more surprised than she should be. She was born in Hell and went to school on Earth. Being to another planet wasn't that strange really, but it was a new experience. Jupiter? Isn't that a gas giant? Rias asked, glancing at the very solid surroundings. Well, the eye is the size of 3 Earths, Shub reminded helpfully. And with a small dwarf planet placed inside the storm, it's the perfect place for this. This being, what? A hidden temple to the Eldritch? Sonagisd. Or that's what I assumed by being called unworthy. Oh, no. That was what's the word? A mistranslation? Shub said in thought. The Blatnungs rely on telepathy to communicate with other races. However, it isn't always perfect in interpreting their thoughts into your words. Oh? Then what did they mean? Rias asked curiously. I'm going to make a guess here, Issei pipped in. I think by unworthy they meant wrongly incarcerated. Sona's eyes went wide. This is a prison. More like juvenile detention, but, yeah, Issei answered with a nod. Aza was telling me about this place earlier. The Azathoth, or Prison of the Red Storm. They mostly keep young, misbehaving eldritch here. The roach guys are actually doctors, in a way. I guess that's why you both saw this place as a hospital. Sounds more like an asylum, Rias noted. I'm surprised that the eldritch would have a place like this. Aza has a very offhanded rule, but even we have rules and lines we need each other to respect, Shub answered. However, the Blatnungs are very firm about making sure all the proper documents are filled out. Rias and Sona stared for a long moment. I'm sorry, I'm just almost surprised the eldritch bother with paperwork, Rias said idly. Same here, Issei agreed, a morbid thought in his head as he looked at Shub. It's not human skin, right? No, not human, Shub answered simply. Somehow, that's less comforting than it should be, Sona said. Do devils not do that? Issei asked curiously, getting surprised looks from them. Sorry, but I literally knew nothing about the supernatural world before Aza. Ah, well, that is a question fresh devil reincarnates often have, Rias accepted. But no, we don't do that anymore. Anymore being the key word, Issei noticed with a sweat drop. Sona, where are you? What happened? Why are there giant bugs? Issei winced at the yell. Upon getting confirmation from Shub that, yes, they could contact their families in the underworld from here, Rias and Sona stepped aside for some relative privacy. Well, that sounds like it's going well, Issei remarked, thankful said, giant bugs, paid the noise little mind, before glancing over to Shub. So, Shub, Nagarath? He could hear Drake silently cursing him in fear, refusing to let himself be sensed by this particular eldritch if he could help it. Shub, however, just giggled. Just Shub is fine. Right, so, what are you the eldritch god of again? I mean, besides your kids? Issei asked curiously. Oh, mainly fertility. And space. Life in general, Shub answered thoughtfully. I also might be the goddess of dark matter? Issei found himself confused but amused. Might be? I don't really know what humans mean by dark matter, Shub explained uncertainly. But if it's what I think it is, then yes, it's related to me. I'm not going to ask, I'll find out eventually, Issei decided, waving the subject off. I must say, you're adapting quite well, Shub said, smiling much the same as one would welcome a new neighbor. Aza is amazing sometimes. I've been trying to convert mortals to eldritch with minimal stress or pain for millions of years, but with ascending you? She might have outclassed me on her first try. Yeah, Aza really is amazing, Issei agreed, the corner of his lips rising easily in fondness. Shub? What was Aza like, before she met me? Ah, Shub looked owlishly. Before she met this you, or the first you? That question didn't even bother him anymore. This me. Not much different than now, really, Shub answered casually. She wasn't as happy, but she was still the same Aza. She'd visit different eldritch she stumbled across, settle disputes, help deal with Nyarlathotep, other problems in our family, and try not to destroy anything important on accident. Or in frustration. The usual. She'd destroy the minds of most mortals that she met, but they often snuck up on her. How does anyone sneak up on her? Issei asked with a furrowed brow. Do you notice an ant crawling on you every time? Shub countered. Okay, fair, just weird. I've seen that true form of hers, so now I have the weird image of it jumping in shock stuck in my head, Issei stated with a distant look. It's funnier when she's near a star and makes it pop, Shub answered playfully, holding up her hands to make a bursting motion. Oh gods, I can see it, Issei said with a reluctant grin as he shook his head. Anyway, not to be weird, but is there a father of the thousand young? Shub's whole body seemed to jerk but covered it up with an easy smile. They both choose pretend not to notice the closet Blatnungs scurrying away from their position. Oh no, not really. It's part of the whole all-mother thing. I don't strictly need a mate. Sounds like it takes the fun out of it, Issei mused. You have no idea, Shub muttered to herself. I'm sorry, what? Issei asked in surprise. I think they're done, she answered, nodding to the devils heading towards them. Rias sighed. I don't think I've ever seen my brother that worried since the day Milikas was born. I'm just glad he's there to keep my sister in check, Sona remarked, giving a small but exasperated smile. I'm not sure how she would have gotten here, but I'm sure she would have found a way. Shub's eyes softened. It's nice to see children so protective of their younger siblings. Rias and Sona felt fairly awkward by the kind words but didn't let it show. Speaking of children, Shub remarked, glancing up at something that perhaps wasn't there. If you'll excuse me, I think there's someone here I need to see. While confused, none of them tried to inquire into what Shub meant as she floated off the floor and headed to one of the tunnels in the ceiling. Sona tilted her head as she observed the retreating goddess. No wings. That's almost to the point of surprising. What, you didn't see them? Issei asked, watching where Shub left to. No. Rias answered with interest. See what? Issei hesitated as he tried to put it into words. Let's just say she's using tentacles from beyond reality to pull herself up there. An uneasy silence fell over them as they continued to wait. Issei could feel Oz's irritation and knew she wasn't done yet. But he wasn't sure just what in the universe he should talk about with these two. They were basically princesses of hell and he was married to a tentacled spaced queen. It felt like they should have a lot to talk about, but for the eternality of him, he couldn't figure it out. So, what's it like? Normally I might be asking that, Issei murmured to himself, looking to the she-devils curiously and grateful they managed to break the ice before he put his foot into his mouth. Being in a relationship with an eldritch, Rias clarified, glancing around the rust-red hive that the Blatnungs called both a home to live in and a detention center to staff. Well, Aza is my first girlfriend, so I don't have anything else to compare her against, Issei remarked hesitatingly. Both looked less than satisfied with the answer. I'm not sure what to tell you. It's like an extreme version of how I'd imagine dating a foreign girl would be. I have to help her understand some things about humans and Earth, but at the end of the day, she's the girl that had the weirdest idea that falling in love with me was a good idea. And can break reality whenever she's upset, Sona pointed out. Like I said, extreme, Issei said with a shrug. What's it like being a devil? Wings, enhanced bodies, magic powers, live almost forever, Sona listed off casually. Among other things. Compared to humans, we're also a lot less repressed in most ways, Rias remarked with a smile. It might surprise you, but polygamy is the norm for us. Issei stared for a long moment at that. I just gave you an idea, didn't I? Rias asked knowingly, feeling a bit sheepish. No, just putting devils on top of the list of things to make sure Aza doesn't accidentally erase, Issei answered bluntly. Sona's eyes widened in a slow, minute manner. I realize you're mostly joking, but is there anything excluded from that list? Not really? I'm still mostly human, and wiping out an entire world still makes my still warping morals queasy, Issei admittedly with a sigh. Sorry, I probably freaked you out with that. Yes, but I'm freaking out inside every time your girlfriend so much as speaks, Rias admitted before taking a thoughtful look. I suppose this is similar to what it's like for humans we turn into devils. Right, I've heard that a few times, Issei recalled with an interested look. Has that always been a thing? Not particularly, Sona answered with a frown. At least not commonly. But we had to after the Great War. I'm going to assume that's not WW1? Issei asked with a raised eyebrow. No, it was a conflict hundreds of years ago between all parties in what's called the biblical factions, the devils, angels, and fallen angels, Rias elaborated. Our numbers were so depleted, converting other races was the only way to prevent the collapse of our species. Issei paused in consideration. Wait, so Kaneko is, or was an actual cat girl before? That's not just some subspecies of devils or something? Somehow, I'm not surprised that's what you picked up, Sona commented neutrally. Rias chuckled. Yes, the ears are natural, and yes, you can probably find more of her. It's not just humanoids though, we've had creatures like dragons reincarnated as devils too. I was so glad you were able to work that out. Rias and Sona made an effort not to jump away as Shub spoke up from behind them, simply turning to face the small eldritch goddess. That can always be a messy venture, finding ways to turn one race into another, Shub stated matter-of-factly. I'm sorry, but are you implying you had some hand in creating the evil pieces? Sona asked warily, the implications leaving her more than a little uncomfortable. Oh no, Shub assured in amusement. But some eldritch gods do something similar, converting their worshippers into their spawnlings. Spawnlings? Rias asked, glancing at Issei. That's a new one for me, Issei answered curiously as he eyed the supposed mother of 1,000 children. Really? No one told you about those yet? Shub asked in surprise. I guess it would still be a while before you have to think about those, but still. Rias and Sona furrowed their brows at that phrasing but didn't press that question. Just so we're clear, is that a word for baby eldritch? Issei asked in alarm. He had been very careful about not thinking too deeply about what a baby between him and Azza would be like. Not because he found the idea itself unappealing. On the contrary, the thought of knocking up the Queen of the Universe was arousing in ways he didn't know possible. It was just, the idea of a baby eldritch god was sort of terrifying. He did not know what to expect or how he'd deal with that. No. Well, not how you mean anyway. Spawnlings are like my 1,000 young and Cthulhu's deep ones. They're an eldritch race that is tied to you as their creator? They, literally spawn off your power. Usually, your body too, but that's mainly just for convenience, Shub explained carefully. Some are less parental with their spawnlings than I am, sadly. Weird, but neat, Issei said, filling that away as just another thing to know about the eldritch. Does Azza have any? Or is that what Gaktha is? Technically yes, but Azza was a bit unconventional. She tried to seed a world with life. She found one race she took a distinct liking to, and made them her spawnlings. I call them her warnuns, Shub explained with a smile. Seed a world with life. That phrase was said with such casualness that it truly put into context how out of their depth the two devils were. That's the unconventional way? Do I even want to know what the Eldritch consider normal for making a spawn race? Issei asked. Spawnlings, not spawns, Shub corrected in a rather motherly manner. And the way most of us do it is ripping off a piece of our flesh, breathing life into it, and shaping it how we desire. I think I like Azza's way better, Issei remarked uncomfortably. Is that how you did it? Shub suddenly became startled and glanced to the side. Mine were more of an accident. I was actually one of the first Eldritch to make spawnlings, she said defensively. Issei could tell he touched a nerve, deciding it best to use Sona and Rias's shock as an excuse to change the subject. Sorry. I sometimes forget how freaky this is for most people, Issei apologized. And no, it's all right, Rias assured. Just, a lot has happened today. Oh, so you devils do have a more human perspective of time? Shub remarked in idle interest. We interact with them a lot, so that probably helps, Sona answered. Not to sound impatient, but do you know how long this might take? It just occurred to me that the Eldritch definition of soon can be months or years. Oh no, the Blatnungs are very punctual. They used to have extremely short lifespans, and that sense of time never left their species entirely, Shub informed helpfully. In fact. Rias. Aquino? Rias turned with a smile, finding herself engulfed in a hug from her queen. Behind her, flying out of a hole, was the rest of her peerage, along with Sona's, accompanied by 3 of the Blatnungs as they touched down in the large room. Sona! Tomo and Rhea cried out, rushing to gulp the petite devil in a hug as well. I'm glad to see you as well, but that's hardly necessary, Sona said, awkward happiness peeking through her stoicism. Rias, however, had no trouble smiling in relief while embracing Aquino, breaking the hug to face the others. By all the underworld, I was so worried about all of you, she said with a warm smile, unshed tears glistening in her eyes. The feeling is mutual, Rias, Kiba said, glancing back at Saji, who was limping while being helped by Momo. Son frowned. What's wrong? Nothing to worry about, Saji waved off. I just need to heal up a bit, and these guys aren't sure how to treat devils. We're more worried about your little vampire, Lady Rias, Momo admitted with a worried frown. Gasper? Rias asked, looking around for him. She was surprised and concerned to see him passed out in Kaniko's arms, but pleasantly relieved to see Kaniko appeared to be doing well. What happened? One of the Blatnungs stepped forth. Housings of containment have restrictiveness on powers of most. Bat creature attempts to turn into many of himself, it explained in what almost sounded apologetic. Measures of this are expecting ones of power that are far greater. Apologies are given for the distress of this one, but damage seems to be less than any. Awakening will happen after well rest of normal passing for his kind. Rias paused to go over that in her head before nodding. I understand. Thank you for your care. Thanks are not needed. But what is needed is a signing, the Blatnung said, holding up something green and see-through. It had a curved surface and appeared to have broken off of something. On it was a strange writing that Rias could not even begin to understand. Please sign for the dismissing of these that were unworthily held. Rias furrowed her brow. Is this your molted exoskeleton? The creature tilted its head. Not my own. She accepted that easily enough. I'm sorry, but I'm not sure how to. You just put your finger on it, Shub supplied as she approached. Channel some magic into it. Rias frowned. I'm not sure I'm comfortable using my full name. The Blatnung holding the paperwork made a displeased sound. No. Full names not used. Only the parts of starts. Rias blinked, causing Shub to giggle. Trust me, they understand your concern. They only need your initials, Shub explained. That works? Sona asked in surprise. Shub smiled. It's enough for a signature, your magic, your initials, and your intent of them being the first letters of your own name. After a moment of hesitation, Rias did as requested, holding her finger to the carapace and inscribing her initials on it with magic. Sign as well, mistress of the others held unworthily, the Blatnung requested, holding the shell to Sona. Sona hummed before looking at Issei. You do understand why we're wary, right? One moment, Issei said as he closed his eyes. Shub looked at him with a surprised expression, while Kaneko inhaled sharply at something only she could see or hear. And opened them a few seconds later. Okay, I just asked Aza. She says there are 0 ways to use these things to hurt or bind you. Which is the whole reason why it's just initials. The worst they can do is track you to the world you're currently on, Issei explained with a shrug. Did you just talk to her with telepathy? Rias asked slowly, everyone else staring in shock and horror. Something like that. Why? Issei answered in confusion. You had the Queen of the Eldritch in your mind? Tsubaki clarified slowly. I like to think of it more like I'm in her, Issei countered with a meaningfully smirk. How is he still sane? Momo whispered quietly. Even I'm a little surprised, Shub said olishly. Even with you, I didn't think Aza could do that without some mental agony at the least. Sona decided to ignore that disturbing fact about Issei, turning her attention to signing her initials. Thanks are given, devils of Underearth. Please do not linger. We care not for your suffering in this place to house those worthy of holding, it requested earnestly, leaving with its associates. These creatures do speak rather strangely, Tsubaki commented as she glanced at Issei. I suppose we should thank you. Don't worry, these two have been doing that plenty, Issei assured with a smile as he motioned to Rias and Sona. Oh? Akino said, her smile turning playful. And just how are our dear kings, thanking you, Issei? I imagine Rias's was more to your liking. Akino, Rias scolded, but still smiling at having her friend safe and sound. I've learned to appreciate smaller knockers when they're from someone that loves you, Issei answered with a shameless grin. Everyone gave him blank or patient looks, except Akino, who only looked more amused as her chest bounced a bit. Oh? Does that mean you don't enjoy big boobs anymore? Fuck no it doesn't, Issei answered instantly. Wait, did he just imply he's groped this eldritch queen we're all scared of? Saji whispered in bewilderment. Oh, he's done more than that, little prison dragon. Everyone jumped in alarm at the new voice, except Issei, who regarded Yog with a raised eyebrow as she stood there, leaning on her sword like a cane as Saji fell on his rear. I was wondering when you'd show back up, Issei mused. Who the hell is the Navy chick? Saji yelled, staring up at the katana wielder in alarm. Yog Sothoth, she greeted casually, making them all freeze in horror as she smiled down at him. That was a wonderful greeting, Saji Genshiro. You know my name? Saji asked, paling under her gaze. Oh, little enveloper, I am the outer god of time, Yog said in amusement. I know everything. Sona was about to step forward, but Issei beat her to the punch. Yog, stop teasing them, they just got out of prison. Must you kill my fun, lover boy? Yog asked, standing straight with a twirl of her sword and a smile on her face. Lover man, thank you very much, Issei said, crossing his arms and lifting his head in mock pride. Careful, Aza might actually call you that, Yog teased, glancing over her shoulder. Speaking of whom, we have about 4 minutes before Aza gets back here and takes Issei off to a date. So to avoid frying anyone's mind again, let's make a hasty exit back to Earth. Issei looked to Kaneko in concern, who was still holding Gasper and pointedly looking in the opposite direction of Yog to preserve her healing sanity. She caught his look. He blinked as she gave him a thumbs up and, was that a little smile? Earth? Sona repeated with a raised eyebrow. Yes, and to answer the question of why I'm not dropping you back in the underworld? Yog started preemptively as she opened the portal, cutting open a rip in reality with her sword. We need a day in real time to clear up the void between realms. This stun of Nireli's made passing through them dangerous at best for anything less than an elder god. And believe it or not, this place and Earth are still on the same side of reality, so dash. How long are you going to ignore me, Yog? Yog jolted as if struck before turning to a frowning Shub. Shubby, you know I could never ignore you. Yog defended with a weak smile. The devils all gave the exchange looks of confusion and uncertainty, while Issei frowned in concern. Then why haven't you said anything to me this entire time? Shub countered coolly. Silence overcame the group. You should probably go, Issei whispered to Rias and Sona. You don't want to be here for, whatever this is. Rias and Sona silently agreed with him, ushering their peerages to the portal. Thank you, Hayatu. We're in your debt, Issei. We appreciate it, really. Issei wasn't sure whether to feel embarrassed or proud as the devils expressed their gratitude while he kept waving them into the portal. We definitely owe you for this one, Akino said with a playful smile. I might just have to reward you myself. I doubt I could say no, Issei said, eyes glancing down at her well-endowed chest briefly. He started as he looked up, only to find Akino had placed a kiss on his cheek. Despite all the kissing he did with Aza, he couldn't help a small blush. If you want more, you'll have to come to take it yourself, Akino whispered lewdly. Issei blushed harder as she left. Akino mostly ignored the concerned look Sona and Rias shared at her actions. Kaneko stopped in front of him. Let me guess, I'm a perv, he tried as he eyed the white-hair girl. Kaneko didn't answer for a moment before, yes, that was definitely a smile. Thank you, Issei. Issei blinked but said nothing as she went through the portal. You know, I'm sure you enjoy it, but I don't like being a damsel relying on you to save my family, Issei, Rias said despite her smile. Issei raised an eyebrow. Rias, I think of you in a lot of ways. Most of which I can't say in school. Or in public. But given everything so far? Damsel isn't one of them. Rias looked surprised for a moment before smiling at the compliment. I suppose I should move along before your queen gets impatient. She might shoo you through herself, yes, Issei agreed with mirth. Sona gave Issei an even look as Rias left. I hope that, not a damsel, sentiment extends to me. If you are a damsel, you're good at hiding it, Issei decided. Sona accepted that answer with a nod, leaving through the portal, causing Issei to sigh in relief as it closed. Now he just had to worry about whatever was going on with Shub and Yog. Because he might not be the smartest person in the world, but any kind of fight between the gods of space and time sounded like a disaster waiting to happen. However, he had forgotten that 4 minutes could quickly run out. Oh issei, Aza called as she jumped to hug him from behind. I'm finally done with all that horrible paperwork. So now we get to have a picnic one of the moons. Aza, that sounds great, but we might have a problem, Issei pointed out apologetically. What? But the devils already got taken home. And I know I didn't mind fry anyone. What else could there be, she asked, almost pouting. In response, Issei pointed to Yog and Shub. They were still just standing with an almost physical awkwardness between them. No, not almost. Issei was sure the awkwardness was becoming its own entity by now, causing the Blatnungs to fly away with instinctive self-preservation. The two gods didn't say a word. Shub's stare was waiting. Yog's stare was uncertain. Both of their stares were sad. Them. This. They're in the same place, Aza realized slowly. We should have that date now. Like right now. Away from here. Issei blinked as he was being tugged, almost dragged away by Aza. Okay? Are you sure this is the best time? It is literally the perfect time, Aza said matter-of-factly. Come on, we can go to one of the moons, have a nice picnic, and hopefully they'll be done before I'm done with you. Or you're done with me. Whichever comes first. What's the difference? Issei asked, trading in his concerned look for a playful grin. Whoever comes last. So, what is this place called again? Issei asked idly as he sat on a picnic blanket, him and Aza leaning their shoulders on each other as they ate their lunch. All around them was a land of red stones, a mountain to their back. Up in the sky had the massive planet of Jupiter to their left, and to the right were all the other moons and objects that orbited the gas giant. Issei had to admit, it was rather breathtaking, in more than one way. It was still weird not need oxygen, but while it didn't harm him, the vacuum of space still gave a small chill to his being. Well, most eldritch call it the scarlet teardrop, in your tongue at least. I think the humans named it after some nymph that raised that one storm god, Aza answered as held up a sandwich to Issei's mouth. Here, take a bite. Issei obliged, taking time to chew and savor it. Not bad. Did you make this yourself? Aza looked a bit sheepish as she hid the lower half of her face behind a sandwich. Well, yes and no. I tried to make it as a human would, but that led to some accidents that I needed Yog to help take care of. So I just kind of willed these into existence. Oh? So you could say I'm eating up your thoughts? Issei asked playfully. You've been doing that for a long time, Aza said affectionately, nuzzling into his shoulder. I'm really glad you're okay. Yeah, about that? I grew a spike out of my shoulder in that fight. Should I be worried? Issei asked uncertainly. No, not at all, Aza said, tapping the shoulder playfully. Your eldritch nature just peeked out a bit more to help defend you. Like adrenal rush. Adrenaline rush? Issei guessed. Ugh, why must humans make such overly complicated names for every little thing, Aza complained. Issei sweat dropped at that. I mean, hey, our naming system is very straightforward if you know the language, Aza defended, grabbing a purple-colored apple and taking a bite. On second look, Issei decided it might be an oversized grape. Isn't that the same with all languages and names? Yeah, but humans use languages they don't know or use anymore for naming things, Aza pointed out. Okay, that's fair, Issei granted. So, is Nirely still lurking about? She always is, Aza answered with a sigh. Is there a reason you can't just put her in timeout? Issei asked with a head tilt. Yes. No. It's complicated, Aza said with a depressed sigh. Issei, look, I wasn't the best mother. Because, well, I'm the first mother, technically. Well, literally. Issei raised an eyebrow. Did you have every one of the Eldritch or their grandparents? Kind of. Eldritch reproduction isn't as straightforward as it is for mortals. We have multiple options, Aza explained vaguely. Anyway, my point is, I didn't know how to be a mother. I couldn't. I was the first one to try it. And Nirely is the way she is primarily because of me. And I don't like punishing her because I feel responsible. Does that make any dash? Aza stopped as Issei pulled her into a deep hug. It makes too much sense, Aza, Issei assured. Really? You're not just saying that, right? Aza asked nervously. Aza, I'm beginning to realize that love is the single strangest, most eldritch emotion in the universe, Issei admitted with a headshake. It doesn't make sense, but it makes things make sense when they really don't, and it makes sure nothing is as simple as it should be. Wow, Aza said in surprise. That sounds like experience. Did you remember some of your past lives? No, Issei answered with a fond smile. But, Aza? I keep treating this like it's something simple. Well, as simple as love can be. But, it's not. You're the queen of the Eldritch. And everyone keeps treating me like I'm someone important dash. You are important, Issei, Aza said firmly. Important to them, Aza, Issei amended. Look, I love you. Ido, seriously. And to me, that's all there is. But after everything? It's finally sinking in that me being with you means a lot more to everyone else in ways I didn't care about at first. Issei, you do realize you're becoming a god, right? Aza reminded with a raised eyebrow. Yeah, but I didn't think that'd be much of a big deal for a long time still, Issei explained with a sigh. I get it, you made mistakes at the dawn of time when you had no one to explain shit to you. I know, I am still going to mess up even with you and everyone else telling me everything I need to know. We just got to deal with it, learn, and make sure to break plenty of bed frames in between, Issei finished with a grin. Aza's ponytail stood straight up at the surprise shift in topic, her smile turning lewd. Oh, we will break plenty of things that way, Issei. Beds, tables, planets, laws of reality. Promises, Aza, Issei said with a grin. Aza giggled and stole a kiss from him. Seriously, we're not going to break this moon doing it here, right? Issei asked cautiously. One way to find out, Aza said in a sing-song voice. Meanwhile, there was an awkward moment after everyone returned to the clubhouse. What should we do now? Tsubaki asked, looking between the two kings. If the Eldritch are to be trusted, the way home will be cleared tomorrow, Sona reminded. No offense, but should we even try that again? Kaneko asked, placing Gasper on the couch. Kaneko has a point, Rias mused, tapping her chin. But I think we'll be safe. If they're clearing the space between worlds, they'll at least be watching for another thing like this. That's a bit of an assumption, Sona remarked. We'll have to speak with the Satans about another train. But for the night? You can all stay here, of course, Rias allowed instantly before looking apologetic. We have spare futons, but we'll need to share the beds and couches. Dibs on the couch, Saji said, moving his leg around. If only so I have a place to perch my leg on comfortably. You can have a bed, Saji, along with some of the others, Sona stated firmly. Rias and I will take the couch. Are you sure, Sona? Seriously, I don't mind the couch, Saji assured. You nearly got your leg broken by an eldritch fruit with thorns for tongues, Momo stated with a chuckle. You get to have the bed. Besides, it would hardly be the first time Sona and I slept on a couch together, Rias assured. Kiba, Kaneko? Show them where we keep the futons. The two peerages filtered out of the room, leaving only Rias, Sona, their queens, and the unconscious Gasper. Okay, so, Issei Hayadu is not human anymore, Rias summarized with a thoughtful look. If he ever was, Sona agreed. Even if we ignore that shoulder spike of his, having mental contact with the demon Sultana. Oh, it's more than just mental, Akino said with a meaningful smile. What do you mean? Tsubaki asked, Sona and Rias looking at the half-fallen with interest. Issei and her are sleeping together, Akino said with a naughty smile. Everyone just stared at that with mile-long looks in their eyes. I was hoping that was just some banter between them, and not something serious, Rias muttered, recalling all the innuendos between Issei and Aza. For all she knew, Aza didn't comprehend intercourse as non-Eldritch did. But, apparently, she did. Even if it's just an avatar in human form, that is still. Sona trailed off for a moment. Disturbing. He's still sane though, or relatively, Rias observed curiously. But if that's true, this dating thing isn't just an act of any kind. More to the point, the other Eldritch appear to approve of him. Approve? Sona repeatet incredulously. Rias, were we watching the same thing? The outer gods treat him either casually or with respect. Madame E did say to give all thanks to Issei, not to her, Akino recalled. And Aza herself is? Rias recalled with a thoughtful look. Indulgent? Doting? She practically treats him as an equal in their relationship. That's my point, Sona said meaningfully. Sona, are you suggesting that Issei Hayadu? Tsubaki asked carefully. Rias sighed and said what Sona was thinking. That man is effectively king of the Eldritch. Meanwhile. Are you sure it's okay we left before Issei and Aza got back? Asia asked nervously as she sat in her room. It's fine, it's fine. Lady Yog told me I should wake you up and leave before everyone got back, Aika answered with a dismissive wave, taking a look around the grayed-out room. So, you got a copy of Lord Issei's room? Oh, the perversion that must live in here. Perversion? Asia repeated thoughtfully. Aza did say that Issei, removed some things from here. Oh, I bet he did, Aika mused, sitting at the computer. Does this thing actually work? I've never tried it. I've never really had much experience with computers, Asia said sheepishly. Aika looked at her with a smirk. Oh, I get to corrupt you with the internet. Joy, she said deviously, turning around to turn it on. Only to blink as the monitor blinked, turning into a giant eye. Said I proceeded to unfold into a four-way mouth, roaring out with a tentacle tongue. Aika screamed and fell backward. Asia gasped, rushing over to try and turn it off by pressing the same button. She was surprised but relieved when that worked. Anyone get the number on that gaunt that hit me? Aika joked as she sat up with a pained voice. Are you all right? Asia asked as she crouched down and gasped. You're bleeding, she said, holding up her hands to try and heal Aika, who was bleeding from the nose and eyes. Yeah, that's what I get for taking my blindfold off, Aika said with a head shake. Don't worry, I only lost about 5% of my sanity just now. Did you really? Asia asked in concern. Yeah. Why wouldn't, Aika stopped, looking Asia up and down. You're not affected. That's interesting. Is it? Asia asked. I've had a few headaches, but nothing like that. The Great Center is less reserved around you, so you should be having some more issues than that, Aika remarked, grabbing Asia's wrist and examining the twilight healing. Do these cure sanity too? I don't think so, Asia answered uncertainly. At least, it never seemed to help with wounds that were more of the mind or heart. Really? Well, it might have gotten an upgrade just from being loosely attached to the queen and her kungur, Aika remarked. So, the Eldritch really do have that sort of effect even on their worshippers? Asia inquired with an uncertain tone. Oh yeah. We have some tolerance built up to it, but hardly anyone is truly immune to the strains they can put on the mind. More so if the Eldritch isn't really trying to be careful. Of course, normal humans not in the supernatural normally aren't at risk at all. Eldritch camo and cloaking keep them sane so long as they are blissfully ignorant. Aika, why do you follow the Eldritch? Asia asked curiously. I don't mean any disrespect, but being around them hurts you. And I thought they didn't really care much for mortals? And my pain is part of my offerings to them, Aika answered with a smile. But that's a complicated question. For most of us, it's the same as worshipping any other god, when you get down to it. We choose what higher being or beings we want to worship and put our trust in. We just choose the highest we could. And unlike terrestrials, Eldritch are eternal. We know our deities will be around for all of eternity. Asia looked down, remembering that the god of the Bible was well and truly dead. Sorry, didn't mean to poke that wound, Ika apologized. And yeah, getting too close to them hurts us. The same is true for anything else, like getting too close to the sun or swimming too deep into the sea. You have to treat them with respect. Not like a king, but a force of nature that will destroy you without noticing, or a beast that will tolerate your presence if you don't provoke it. God always brought me comfort, Asia said softly. Does worshipping Aza and the others bring comfort? In a semi-nihilistic kind of way, Ika admitted. Asia? For us, nothing matters besides the eldritch. They are more real than us, than anything. They are a true part of reality, and humanity would cease to be if they weren't fond of us. So think about it. What is more fulfilling than following the will of a being that you know matters, and is important in ways you will never understand? Asia sat there in a strange, considering silence. Asia, the demon sultana is the ruler of the universe, she can change reality just by dreaming, Ika continued. Do you know what it means just to stand in front of her? To kneel before her? If she crushed my skull herself, that means there is no doubt I truly existed because the queen of the eldritch herself touched my head to kill me. Does that mean it's impossible for them to love mortals? Asia asked softly. Oh no, they can, Ika said with a chuckle. Despite everything, Issei was human once, and the demon sultana loved him so much she made him her sultan. The black goat takes her most beloved followers and reincarnates them into her children. Lady Yog herself has had a child or two with humans. Asia smiled a bit at that. But even if they don't love you back, that shouldn't stop you from loving them, Ika pointed out. Of course not, Asia agreed softly. Love isn't always mutual. That doesn't mean it isn't real. Ika just nodded in agreement. Ika, could you teach me some eldritch prayers? Asia asked timidly. Oh, Asia, it would be my pleasure, Ika promised, trying not to sound too happy about this turn of events. Corruption Plan B was a go. Meanwhile, lemon warning. Issei sighed contently as he lay on the tiny moon surface, naked as the day he was born with an equally nude Aza resting on his chest, her legs curled around one of his. He glanced around, somewhat surprised to see how unaffected the terrain was. Normally there was some unwarping that needed to be done. Granted, one of the other moons above them had turned into a pyramid with inverted corners. I wish these moments could last forever, Aza whispered, a finger trailing over his chest, the back of her hand covered in red scales with little thorns jutted out, pulsing in a pleased manner. Maybe one day, we'll always be one. The idea of a total fusion with Aza wasn't entirely romantic or appealing to him right now, but in a billion years? Who knew what he'd think of it after some strange eons pass? Still, Aza gasped, the thorns pulsing in excitement now as Issei pushed up his knee, pressing and grinding it against Aza's pussy. Who said we're done? Issei said playfully as he leaned over and began to kiss and lick at her neck. Or maybe we'll just keep making love eternally, once you can last that long, Aza purred in excitement. That, on the other tentacle, had a lot of appeal to Issei in the here and now. Best to keep practicing, Issei said as he reached up and grabbed one of Aza's ponytails. Aza let out a small groan as he did, now all but humping his knee now. Issei smirked as he got better access to Aza's neck. She liked it a little rough. Not too rough, not yet, but just enough to make her need to hold her meat suit together properly. Her hair wrapped around his wrist, tightly, and actually pulled his arm just a little harder, even as the hair turned into a series of tiny, clawless animal paws. Aza breathed deep and it was almost a growl as she pushed him back down onto the ground. You mind if I ride you a bit while you rein me in? Aza asked, moving to straddle his waist. Issei didn't know if it was intentional or subconscious on Aza's part, but the moon had moved enough so that Jupiter was right behind Aza, framing her form as she looked at him with desire. It gave her a look of both primal need and divine regality. In response, Issei bucked his hips up, his cock pressing into her wet, eager hole. Aza inhaled before suddenly slamming her hips down on him, her hips meeting his with vigor. Issei grunted in pleasure as he removed his hand from her hair and began to knead and fondle her breasts. But his tail picked up the slack, grabbing both ponytails and pulling back just enough for Aza to feel the tugging of her skin. Where did he get a tail? Issei didn't question it anymore. Just like how he didn't question the red moon turning green below them or the distant mountain erupting with bright black water that streamed down the side. No, he was too invested in attending to and being attended by this needy, lustful goddess. And Aza? As always when they made love, her eyes were always on him and only him, his pleasure, his body, his love, his lust, his everything. She wanted to feel every bit of his existence and he was all too willing to oblige. Aza smirked and suddenly she now had 3 boobs. The simplest of things sometimes had the greatest effect, Issei pausing for only an instant before lurching up to take the middle breast into his mouth, nibbling and biting it. Aza groaned out something like the roar of a shrill dragon, wrapping her arms around Issei and pulling him closer, her many, many arms. Each is different, but all are Aza. Her nails would have claws through his back if not for the crystallized surface growing over it. Aza chirped in surprise, causing him to pause. "What?" he asked, pulling back to eye her as his breathing was deep and craving for her. "MMM? Did you grow a second cock?" she asked with a primal smile that was wider than her mouth, sweat illuminating her body. Issei checked the feeling in his pelvis, his cock still buried firmly in the tight embrace of her womanhood. "No, that's a second tail," he answered with a smirk. "With how it's going for my ass, I think it wants to be a second cock," she purred. "Here, let me help with that." She reached back and spread her cheeks, inviting the smaller, stubbier tail access to poke and prod her rosebud. Issei practically snarled as he recaptured her lips, their humping redoubled with the efforts of his new limb to invade her more forbidden entrance. Aza groaned and shuddered as it finally wiggled in, coming on his true cock, her skin rippling into a blue shade for an instant as she struggled to keep hold of her disguise. End of lemon. Meanwhile, you'd think he'd pardon the occasional cock-blocking with all the cock-enabling I do, Yog mused to herself with a sigh, watching the lovemaking from a point in time that existed after, before ended and before, later, began. Her eyes drifted to Jupiter. She, in the future, was having a confrontation with Shub. She wasn't looking forward to that. She could feel her own future emotions like a human sees a storm, obviously coming towards them with little chance of avoiding it. Still, it wasn't like she was procrastinating. Someone had to make sure Issei and Aza didn't do too much to Jupiter's moons. Some of these were actually important after all. Still hiding, Yog? Yog narrowed her eyes as she looked over her shoulder. "If you try anything dash. Are you implying I would hurt my new father?" Nyarlathotep asked with a smirk. "No, jag answered knowingly. But if you do anything to interrupt them right now?" "Mother would be furious," Nyarli agreed wryly. "But I didn't come to talk about our new king." "Then why are you here?" Yog asked pointedly. "Oh, just checking in on my poor niece," Nyarli answered whimsically. Yog snorted. "I'm touched, auntie. I wasn't talking about you." Yog froze as if stricken, slowly turning to face the cruel, golden eyes of Nyarlathotep. "All the time in the world, and you spend every moment of it away from her," Nyarli said coyly. "How cruel you are to poor Shub." The Hound of Tindalos appeared. Then another, and another, crawling from every corner of Yog's hole in the timelines, their oozing blue forms glaring at the Black Pharaoh. But Nyarli, in all her wicked visages, only laughed. "Now that's cute, Yog. Go ahead, and destroy this form if it helps you vent. I have 5 more. "They're not for you," Yog answered with an empty, wide, unholy smile. "Tell me, auntie? How many of your precious toys do you think I can rip from the timeline? How many can you keep a hold of without ruining them?" If anything, that seemed to delight the cruel goddess even more. "Now that sounds like fun," she said as she waltzed up to Yog, placing a lazy half-armed hug around her, Yog eyeing her the entire time. "But I wonder how many of those playthings you really know about?" Yog narrowed her eyes. "It'll be so amusing to find out how many I kept out of your all-seeing sight, great key," Nyarli whispered. Yog glared for a moment longer before dismissing the hounds. "Did you have something to say or did you just want to torment someone your own size for a change?" Nyarli hummed as she removed herself from the time goddess's form. "Despite everything, we are on the same side." Yog didn't dispute that. Nyarlathotep was cruel to mortals and loved to twist the emotions of her fellow eldritch, but she did aid them in her own ways. "You should keep an eye on the sealed eldritch," Nyarli warned idly. Yog frowned. "I already am." Nyarli turned to her with a mysterious smile. "Oh, Yog. You know as well as I that Mother's honeymoon on Earth is drawing all kinds of attention from around the cosmos." Yog's eyes slowly went wide. "Ah, I see you remember that I am not the only one above your gaze," Nyarli said with a giggle, and Yog knew someone somewhere just died painfully. "Poor Yog. You must hate us, those of the outer gods that your precious time can't touch. To be reminded of just how truly fallible you are, daughter." Everything stopped, both outer gods slowly looking out into real time, where Aza and Issei were still humping like unearthly rabbits. But the Eldritch Queen was glaring over Issei's shoulder, beyond time and space, right at the vile goddess she had spawned. Leave. Now. Nyarlathotep met her mother's gaze before fading away into a mist of blackness. Yog breathed deeply and felt even her true form uncoiling some in a faraway time and place. Dealing with Nyarli was always a hassle. Hard to believe she's related to my parents. While it was a rather strange notion still, Issei rather enjoyed the dating and lovemaking on another planet. Or another planet's moon rather, but who cared? However, he found the next part as amusing as it was annoying. Damn it, Yog, Azza muttered as they passed through one of the halls of the Agtsunlutin. One that was more or less horizontal in direction, thankfully for Issei. She knows I need her or Shub to send us back to Earth. How bad would it be if you tried? Issei asked in morbid curiosity. You'd probably have to relearn all the new landmasses after I accidentally warped the continents into new shapes and places, Azza answered casually. And probably kill, I don't know, a tenth of all humanity? That idea didn't appeal to Issei, but it also didn't horrify him as much as it probably should. Yeah, let's not do that, he decided as he walked around a hole, leading down into another passage. What's that smell? Azza paused and took a sniff. Oh, we're just over, I guess you could call it rehab? Rehab for what, exactly? Issei questioned in surprise. Some eldritch get addicted to something that I don't think humans have a word for? Azza answered uncertainly. We call it Kiet. You know how the ozone keeps planets from frying? Issei blinked. Ozone is an eldritch drug? No, Kiet is more of a concept than a physical thing. But if too much Kiet is eaten, the ozone can't stay formed, Azza answered with a shrug. It doesn't do anything for eldritch gods, it's not potent enough for us, but for the lesser eldritch? It's addictive. And getting them unaddicted to it can make their bodies hurl and molt, and regrow eyeballs they weren't missing or didn't have. Well, okay, I'm not surprised by the smell then, Issei decided to accept. I guess it's nice you have a place to help get them off it. If you're eldritch, you're eternal. Which means that we're all stuck together, Azza pointed out with a smile over her shoulder. So I'd rather most of us get along if we can. Issei returned the smile but stopped walking. Azza, he said awkwardly, glancing down. Azza blinked, realizing she was walking out on open air, having idly ignored gravity without realizing it. Huh? Where are we again? She asked, glancing around at the large void she had wandered out into. Oh, right, this is the main entrance. As if on cue, Issei felt a small pang in his head but received no vision. Because none was needed. Into the massive canyon floated an enormous tentacle of purple and pus-soaked flesh, covered with suckers linked with needling fangs and vile tongues. He followed the blighted limb, a leviathan onto its own, and found that led up to a massive orb of flesh that was hidden beyond some bluish mist veiling its titanic and manic divinity, with countless other limbs swooshing in the sky. Kasa'agtha, Azza greeted with neutral politeness. If you're here to visit your daughters, don't stop on my account. Issei peered up at the entity while making sure not to fall off the edge. The outstretched limb pointed its tip towards him and Issei got the sense it was asking about himself. Yes, this is my beloved. He's still mostly human, so if you want to meet him? Azza said promptingly. The limb retracted into the native rust-red abyss above the hidden moon, the eldritch god ascending until the unfathomable form might be mistaken for a violet moon behind clouds. Ugh! Issei jumped in an about-face, nearly falling off the edge if not for Azza standing in the air, holding his back up with one hand. Don't worry, you were safe either way, Azza assured with a smile as she helped set him upright before stepping back onto the solid floor, giving Issei a chance to see the new arrival. So sorry, lady, lord. I wasn't expecting to be using this form today, a woman said while spitting out something vile and possibly alive, with long bright purple hair up in a ponytail, her eyes the same shade. Her clothing was, in Issei's best description, that of a sexy secretary. Her outfit was a dark red, almost black, that consisted of a thigh-length skirt, a leather pouch strapped to her hip, and a business shirt that did nothing to hide her cleavage, which was bountiful and held up a white blazer underneath. She had a shirtless collar, like a Playboy bunny girl, complete with a tie that came down between her chest. Really, Cass? What form do you visit your children in? Azza asked curiously. This, but I didn't plan on being here today at all, Cass confessed with a sigh, straightening herself up properly. I'm sorry, that was a rather poor first impression. I'm Kasa'agtha, my Kungur, but you can call me Cass if you like. I think I would, Issei answered, enjoying the view, but also noticing that she seemed nervous. However, he didn't draw attention to her discomfort, since it was probably just from suddenly being in human form. I'm Issei, by the way, but I'm assuming everyone in the faction knows that already? Even the ones that haven't been born yet, Cass said in jest with a weak attempt at a smile. Our sultana's pipes and flutes have been singing pleasant tunes non-stop, for the most part. Pipes and flutes? Issei questioned, looking at Aza. The outer goddess suddenly seemed a bit embarrassed, scratching her cheek as she glanced away. Being queen of the universe can be stressful, and so I made some music that helps soothe me. Lady Azathoth, you're scratching your cheek off, Cass warned, causing Aza to stop and let the damage heal instantly. Shub told me that you were both here, so I dropped in to introduce myself. I thought it might help with the, thing you wanted me to help with. Issei rose an eyebrow as Cass glanced between him and Aza. Thing, he asked his lover. Aza sighed, glancing upward with a mild glare. Yog, did you have to give it to her this soon? She asked rhetorically. Issei knew he heard Yog chuckling somewhere, in a nearby corner of time. Yog, one of these days, I'll figure out how to get in there, Issei warned, matching Aza's energy. The chuckle silenced. Cass looked fairly uncertain now. I'm sorry? I didn't realize you weren't aware, Kungur. Azathoth and Sothoth asked me to help put together a list of potential servants for you to choose from. I thought I wasn't getting a cult for a while. Issei inquired with a raised eyebrow. Not cultists, beloved, servants. It's more like what Gaktha is to me, eldritch that are your direct subordinates and underlings, Aza explained. Okay, excluding you in very specifically sexy definitions, who'd want to serve me? Issei asked skeptically, getting a playful smile from Aza. You'd be surprised, Lord, Cass spoke up with a charming smile. Everyone is curious about how you'll turn out as a ruler of the eldritch. And, well, Cass paused, looking through Issei in some sense. It's getting pretty obvious to all of us that you intend to be an outer god. You can all sense that, eh? Issei mused. So, what, you're here to get a look at my personality? A bit. I mean, I'm aware you have a taste for voluptuous female humanoid forms, Cass answered, either ignoring or not noticing Issei's eyes on her own voluptuous female humanoid form. But I do know several not female eldritch that you might be interested in them. What's the word for not sexual again? Neptunic? Plutonic. You mean platonic? Issei supplied. And yeah, I wouldn't mind having one or two brothers to talk to about eldritch guy stuff. Cass nodded in understanding before biting her lips. There was also, well, a request I would like to make. Issei rose an eyebrow while Aza grimaced. Cass, right now, she asked, torn between sympathy and exasperation. Well, we are here, Azathoth, Cass pointed out weakly. I know, but still, Aza said, trailing off. Someone want to fill me in? Issei asked with a frown. He felt a tingle in the back of his skull as he heard a familiar voice. Kasagatha's daughters are in this prison, Shub informed, stepping out from behind him with an understanding smile. She was hoping to put them on a parole of sorts if you would take them on as your servants. Issei stared for a moment before blinking as he shook his head. Sorry, had to let a few fantasies work themselves out in my head. So, okay, what's the catch? He asked, looking at Aza and Cass. How'd they end up in here? They're mischievous, Aza answered vaguely. They get carried away, Cass answered carefully. Issei let the unhelpful answers hang in the air before turning to Shub, who smiled. Oh, they made a lot of problems with pranks. They've managed to cause the destruction of 5 worlds, 6 spawnling races, 3 avatars, 10 separate cults, and at least enough copies of the Necronomicon to fill 24 worlds, she explained casually, Aza nodding along in agreement while Cass bowed her shame-filled face. Shub hummed before recalling a final detail. Oh, and the death of one elder god. But he's not too mad about it. Issei stared for a long moment at the goat goddess before looking at Cass. They did that, with pranks? Cass nodded slowly. They've been in this phase for 1,000 years or so. And I'm not sure how to help them. And the other parent, or parents can't help? Issei asked curiously. Cthulhu tries, but there is only so much he can do while stuck on Earth, Cass answered. That, and, they had a falling out with some of his other children. Okay, first off, is Cthulhu going to be pissed about me having his daughters as servants? Issei asked curiously. I want to at least know if I have to deal with a squid dragon going dad mode on me. Oh no, Cthulhu is actually pretty nice. Believe it or not, he enjoys how popular he is on Earth, Aza informed casually. Is he still making that things to do when I can get out without destroying the world list? Shub inquired playfully. I believe the top one was teasing one of his sons for causing all of the tentacle hentai. One of your kids did that? Issei said in amazement to Cass. Cass blinked. No, different mother, so just my nephew. And yes, Cthulhu is still making the list. Okay, well, that's something I'll be thinking about, Issei mused. Anyway, we got off topic. You want me to take on your daughters, which is tempting on the face of it. But I live on Earth and I'm now a little concerned about them adding a sixth world to the list. They'll have a very long time here if that happens, Shub noted. Don't worry, Azza said with a sigh. I actually expected this to happen. If you take them on, I'll make sure you'll have a way to discipline them and keep them from causing problems. You sound like you think I already made up my mind, Issei commented. Beloved, I know you. And I know these two. You want to meet them, I know you do, and I know we're going to end up with a pair of twins calling you master before we leave here. Well, yeah, now I'm obliged to meet them when you put it like that, Issei said with a grin before turning to Cass. That said, I'm not promising anything. If I think they're too much trouble, I don't think I can help right now. I understand, and thank you, Kungur, Cass said in relief. Shub leaned forward to look at Azza. You mind if I escort him there, Lady Azza? I know you're rather protective of your beloved Dash. It's fine, I trust you to telepunt him back to me if anything happens, Azza assured with a smile. Besides, I want to hear more about this list Cass has prepared. Shub nodded in appreciation before taking Issei's arm. Right this way, Your Majesty. With that, she led him to the edge of the abyss again and, with care, stepped off the side. Issei swallowed thickly as they began to float down to the lower sections. Once they were gone, Cass looked down. Are you mad, Azathoth? Not really. Annoyed with your impatience, but I get it, Azza waved off. I know what they mean to you, Cass, but we really couldn't let things go on. I know, Cass said in acceptance. I heard that, your daughter is giving you problems too. Azza gave a mighty sigh, one that distorted the very air around them. Don't worry, Cass. Your girls aren't like her. I'm glad you think so, Cass said, smiling in relief. I know so. If I didn't, I would have sent them someplace worse, Azza answered bluntly, noticing Cass's wince. Cass, did you think this through? Cass looked at Azza with a frown. You mean, am I prepared for what you'll do to them, if they accidentally harm your beloved? Azza's only answer was a silent hell Cass could see forming behind the demon Sultana's eyes. Meanwhile, Issei nearly tripped as he awkwardly was brought back onto a solid path, another tunnel with an end only a short way down. Thanks. Hope I can fly like that, Issei said, glancing above Shub, where he knew her non-existent limbs were. Shub smiled encouragingly. I'm sure you'll get it once you stop believing in gravity. What, gravity isn't real? Issei questioned curiously. No, it is, Shub assured. But you need to make gravity believe in you. And it will only do that when you stop believing it in. It's a bit, how might you say? Tsundere. Gravity is tsundere. That makes more sense than it probably should, Issei said, glancing down the hall. So, any advice? Don't worry, they'll play nice. They know you're their last shot at getting out of here this eon, Shub explained. Beyond that, make your own judgment. After all, you are our king. Does that bother any of you? Me being a former human, now just dropped into being king because Azza decided she loved me? Issei asked curiously. Shub raised an eyebrow. That's like being upset that Azza is the queen of the Eldritch. She just happened to be who and what she is. She didn't choose it, just like she didn't choose who she'd love. You being Azza's beloved makes you the Eldritch king by default. Stars burn out, galaxies drift apart, and you are king of the Eldritch. Simple as that. I guess that's one way of looking at it, but doesn't really answer my question, Issei pointed out. Shub hummed. You're like a black hole that appeared from nowhere, I suppose. Okay? Issei questioned in uncertainty. You are a new gravitational force that appeared in the metaphorical orbital systems that make up our eternal lives. As you grow, more and more orbits are thrown off their old paths, but inevitably, we will all stabilize and adjust. Or be flung out of gravity's hold, for those that do cause you trouble. That is, one hell of a metaphor, Issei said, taking it all in contemplatively. I thought you didn't believe in gravity. Shub smiled wryly. I don't need to believe it to use it as a metaphor. Issei chuckled at that. Fair enough. So, how do I get inside that? Shub tilted her head as Issei pointed at the end of the hall. I mean, if you need to use the bathroom that badly? What? I thought that was a cell. Issei asked in surprise. No, that is where the cell is, Shub informed, pointing to the curved wall to her right. Issei squinted and saw a vague, oval outline that he assumed was probably the entrance. Okay, so do I just touch it? Yes, Shub answered with a smile, honest and blunt. Right then, Issei said, shrugging it off as he approached. The outline pulsed organically as he approached, strange lights forming inside and flowing to the center. Issei stared at it skeptically as he stepped towards it, and was immediately swallowed whole by it, and blinked as he appeared somewhere else, as if he hadn't even moved. Well, okay then, he said, checking over to make sure he hadn't lost or gained any limbs. He was glad nothing was lost when he looked down his pants, but almost disappointed nothing was gained. Slithering and hissing drew him back to the situation at hand. He was in a room that was, mostly, shaped like the inside of a hollow pyramid. But along the walls were erratic pillars that zigzagged, with edges that randomly became inverted, and paths that were impossible to keep track of. It was all dark green with a pale glow coming from the center, where there was something that looked like a fountain or oversized bird bath, kept a few feet off the ground by a tiny stone pillar under it. Are you him? One voice called, curiously playful. Are you our Nansat? Another asked, playfully curiously. I might be, Issei answered as he calmly looked around the room. I hear you two are quite the troublemakers. We didn't mean to. We just wanted some fun. Issei hummed as he paced around the water fixture. Sounds like you had a bit too much fun. Yes, we made Mama sad. We have to stay here now. Issei glanced up at the twisting structures overhead. He could tell something moving in the shadows, but could never get a good look at where it was before disappearing. Unless I take you both on, right? Both. Yes. We would rather be together here, instead of being separated anywhere. Oh, I have no interest in breaking up sisters, Issei said with a chuckle. Now, stop playing hide and seek. As you wish, sir, they answered in unison. He turned around and looked over to the other side of the fountain, and saw the curve of two large serpent tails. Every intelligent part of Issei said that he should be careful, but every instinct said there was no danger here. He always liked going with his gut. He turned forward and finally saw them, and they saw him. Their skin was tinted purple, and their hair was white as bright as starlight. Their scales were a dark violet that gleamed when light shined on them. Their eyes looked as if painted red with blood. Their faces were identical, and they were also naked. Not completely naked, but that might have actually been less lewd. He had never seen a snake up close, but he was pretty sure their loincloths weren't needed to hide their modesty, and that was even assuming their womanhoods weren't more visible and accessible from the rear. Their fingerless, arm-length velvet-looking gloves only helped draw attention more to their bare chests. The only clothing on their torsos were adornments that cling to their breasts like jewelry while defying gravity, with small red gemstones over their nipples. He blushed for a bit before splashing some of the water on his face, not really caring if it might not actually be water. He had seen Azza naked plenty, yes. But they hadn't actually gotten around to her trying on sexy, kinky clothes, so this was a bit new for him. I believe Sir approves of our forms, Sister Tosa, the one on the left said with a smile. I believe you are right, Sister Alhu, the right agreed cautiously. He rose an eyebrow at that. My name's Issei. What's yours? Ektosa. Cthulhu. As one, they pulled back slightly, spreading out their arms and bowing their heads to him. Welcome to our cell, sir, they said in perfect sync. Ektosa and Cthulhu. Got it, Issei committed to memory. So, that word you used earlier is a bit new to me. What does Nansat mean? Oh, they asked, cocking their heads away in opposite directions. A Nansat is a mentor. Teacher. Watcher, Cthulhu explained. Keeper. Warden. Master, Ektosa finished as they both slithered closer. Do you want to be our master, sir? They both asked. We've been bad, but we can be good, sir, Ektosa implored. We will be very good for you if you let us out, sir, Cthulhu assured. Issei was almost positive he was being seduced, but their curious and hopeful eyes were utterly devoid of lust or lewd intentions. That didn't make their wording any less erotic. He took a deep breath and wondered how much trouble it would be if he fucked Azza inside this prison. Probably a lot. Okay, before I agree to anything this tempting, I have a handful of questions, he stated, making them lean in more with inquisitive eyes. Why did you do all of those things? The pranks that got you sent here? We thought it would be fun, Cthulhu answered, looking down. We didn't know it'd be bad, Ektosa swore as she looked away. Issei furrowed around. That sounded almost like spoiled brats making excuses, but there was something there he wasn't quite getting. Still, how do I know you're both going to try and behave? Both sisters brought themselves low enough that their heads were at level with his chest as they looked up at him. We will do anything you say, sir. And nothing else, sir. Issei nearly choked at the imagery and words. Mainly the imagery, Aza had screamed worse. Okay, Issei said, rubbing his head and trying not to think of how tight his pants were getting. What can you do, exactly? Power-wise? Oh, they said, as if surprised. We are not much, Ectosa said humbly. Our father grants us some water powers. Our bodies are also almost as durable as great old ones, Cthulhu said with some pride. Cthulhu can control snakes and serpents, Ectosa added with praise to her sister. And Ectosa has a talent for flesh sculpting, Cthulhu shared with the same tone. Issei smiled at the rather wholesome behavior from the definitely not wholesome pair. Drake, I know you're hiding, but if you have any reason to think this is a bad idea, say something now. I'll take that as a no, Issei muttered with a grin as he straightened himself. Okay, well, I'm convinced and interested enough. I'll take you on as my servants, he said, hardly believing he was saying that. There was a shift in the air, a buzzing in the background as some unseen, otherworldly magic accepted what he had said to be fact. What that entailed, he had no idea but decided not to dwell on it now. The Encto sisters crossed both hands over their chests, bowing their heads while looking up at him with grateful, cool orbs of blood. Thank you, Nansat Issei, sir. Okay, seriously, did your mother tell you to call me sir? Issei asked in suspicion. They quirked their heads, rising up slightly from their lowered position. No, but mother told us to be respectful, Ectosa pointed out. And that you were staying on Earth, Cthulhu continued. Isn't sir an earthen term of respect? They both asked, fingers to their chins. In retrospect, I'm kind of surprised you know much about Earth, Issei mused. They both turned sad at that. We tried to visit father over the ages, they said in sync. Right, they had a father trapped in one of Earth's seas. He made a mental note to ask Aza and Yog about visiting that sunken city. Sorry to bring up bad memories, he apologized awkwardly. Is there anything you need to get here? No, they both answered, short and simple. Well, okay then, Issei accepted with a shrug as he headed to the exit. Come on, I think you're allowed out now. If we aren't, we won't be out, Ectosa remarked idly. The Red Eye is a very good prison, Cthulhu remarked knowingly. Why did Issei get the impression they had tried to escape here? True to Issei's hunch, when the swallowing door took him, all three of them emerged back into the hall. Queen Azathoth, the twins exclaimed in fright, suddenly cowering behind Issei. Issei blinked at their behavior, looking out to see that not only was Shub still there, but Cass and Aza were as well. Girls. My dear puss babies. Cass exclaimed enthusiastically as she raced over to the Lamia pair. Mother, they both greeted, hugging her in shock but also in fear as Aza approached with Shub. What's wrong? Ectosa asked warily. Do we have to go back? Cthulhu questioned in worry. Huh? What do you mean? Didn't Lord Issei agree to make you his servants? Cass asked in confusion. Yes, but why is the Almighty Center here? Ectosa asked. Why is her gaze of judgment on us? Cthulhu questioned, trembling in her mother's arms. Aza tilted her head as she looked at Shub. You didn't tell them? Shub looked a bit sheepish. They're one of the only ones that probably don't know yet, so I wanted to let you surprise them. Grandmother, that's just a bit mean, Cass scolded with a sigh. I'm sorry, I forgot that they were scared of Aza. Well, more than they need to be, Shub corrected herself idly. Ah, well, that'll be remedied easily enough, Aza said with a smile. Twins of Cthulhu, I'm not here to punish you. I'm just visiting with my beloved. They blinked, and even that was in sync. Beloved? Yo, Issei greeted, raising his hand with a grin. The twins stared for a long time before Issei witnessed something he hadn't seen before. Eldritch fainting. So, what made you think I'd take them? Issei asked with a smirk. Twin Eldritch daughters offering to serve you, with the deal sealed by your natural desire to help others, Aza answered knowingly, giving him a half-lidded smile. Though, it seems like they got you a bit worked up. Shub, send us home so I can help Issei, relax. Naturally, the second attempt to return to the underworld had been more uneasy and nervous for the two groups of devils. Needless to say, they were all rather grateful and relieved when they arrived, stepping safely off into Gremory territory. They did, however, expect Rias and Sona to be immediately attacked on arrival. Sununa. Seraphal declared, instantly pulling her younger sister into a tight, almost desperate hug. I was so worried about you. I thought the Eldritch were going to ravish your adorable head. Not an inaccurate concern, Sona murmured, begrudgingly allowing her sister this. After all, she was inwardly glad to be home as well after everything that happened. Rias. Zeoticus said, instantly upon his daughter, hands on her shoulders as he looked her up and down. Are you all right? They didn't do anything to you, did they? Rias smiled in assurance. I'm fine, father, she said, pulling him into a hug. Zeoticus only paused for a second before embracing her wholeheartedly. You all gave us quite a fright, Venelana said, approaching with Lord and Lady Citri. When we heard of the train crashing, we feared the worst until your message, Lord Citri said, waiting for Sona to wiggle herself out of Seraphal's grip before taking her into an embrace of his own, his wife joining as well. Crash? Aquino repeated with a raised eyebrow. Well, the front half that made it through, Surzek explained, smiling at his sister and her peerage with Graphia by his side. It's glad to see you are all safe and sound. Sona, I'm sure you wish to return to Citri territory soon, but may I borrow you and Rias for a moment? Sona Ferovnit. Lord Lucifer, you may wish for our queens to stay as well. They were present for events we didn't see ourselves. Not losing a beat, Surzek nodded in acceptance. The rest of you may go and relax. We shouldn't be long. Most of the young devils headed off, guided by Graphia. Venelana took this chance to give Rias a hug as well, kissing her on the forehead. Ahem, Rias cleared her throat with a small blush, Venelana giggling at Rias's reaction. As we said before, our train was locked between realms by an eldritch, who sent her servants to attack us. Rias and I were in another compartment, and they were both cut off from one another, Sona elaborated. We were forced to fight something that looked like a harpy but clearly, was more than that. They all shared Sona's unease as Zeoticus turned to Tsubaki and Aquino. And you, young ladies? What did the rest of you face? In all seriousness, my lord? Aquino started with a frown. Something like a cross between a pear and spider, with these, spiked, tongue-like things on the humps. There were a great many of them, Tsubaki picked up. They seemed to be determined to make us suffer for some crime. Crime? Surzek said with narrowed eyes. Did they say what? They just kept calling us Blackwings, and that we angered the Eldritch Queen, Tsubaki answered. They were sent by the Queen herself? Lord Citri asked, all of them paling at the implications. No, we know they weren't, Sona said bluntly, taking a deep sigh. There is no gentle way to say this. We met the demon Sultana. Silence filled the area. You met her? Venelana asked, looking as if her daughter had survived the worst possible thing and come out fine. Which wasn't entirely inaccurate. Issei Hayadu arrived and helped us, even sharing how to defeat these creatures, Aquino informed with a smile. He then proceeded to venture into the area Rias and Sona were trapped in to aid them. And aid he did, Rias said with a grateful look. After that, well, it's a bit complicated, but due to the nature of the trap, our peerages were stranded on an eldritch prison on Jupiter. Zeoticus wiped a hand over his face. That is, a lot to take in. But you met the queen during all this? Well, Sona and Rias did, Aquino answered. Apparently she had to do paperwork to let us out. The Eldritch have paperwork? Surzek asked in honest surprise. The Eldritch use paper? Lady Citri questioned. Yes they do, and no. No they don't, Rias answered. The adults wisely didn't question that one for now. When Sona and I awoke, we were back in the human world, at my clubhouse. Issei Hayadu and other Eldritch gods aided us in retrieving our servants. The guards were, actually, quite hospitable and understanding about everything, Sona explained. You mean the giant bugs? Seraphal questioned curiously, getting a reluctant nod. But if the queen didn't send them after you, who did? Surzek questioned. The Black Pharaoh. Rias, Sona, Tsubaki, and Aquino instantly found themselves almost hurled behind the adult devils as they pointed magic circles at the voice. There, on top of the train, was a horseman. Not a rider, but a being that was horse and man both. Yet it was no centaur, no. The horse part was a full horse, however malformed, with the man half appearing to be fused onto the back. Both were made of twisted, gray flesh that was ripped and torn all about. Purple flesh roped in and out of the gaps as if tying it all together. The horse's legs mutated and misshaped, one looking backward while another had a smaller leg growing off of it. The horse head was an abomination unto itself, looking as if it had been split in two by a great axe, and only partially put itself back together. The rider was cloaked in his own twisted skin, and only a vile, dim light could be seen beneath his hood where his face should be. In his hands, he held a large and twisted halberd, its color purple, and its presence filled the air with dread. "Dismiss your magics, devils. Your doom does not come today," the eldritch called out in warning. "Who are you? And why are you here?" Surzek asked pointedly. "What a great ruin your power shines with, Crimson Satan," it called out in praise. "My name is the same in every tongue. Among the eldritch, it is Lagusson. I was tasked by Yog-Sothoth and Great Azathoth. Several of them flinched at the names. To guard these child devils to their home, and fend off the machinations of the crawling chaos, Lagusson answered civilly. "We weren't told of that," Tsubaki said with a frown, wondering if it was a trick. "The demon Sultana would not think to, and I have little doubt the Lurker of Time found it amusing not to," Lagusson remarked knowingly. "Tell me, do you think I would use their names so lightly if I wasn't here at their bidding?" The devils shared a look before slowly lowering their hands and dispelling their magic. "If that is true, we thank you," Zeoticus said, frowning despite his thanks as he glanced at the horse half of Lagusson. "I would offer you a place at the tables, but—" "I do not require your thanks, but there is another matter I am here for," Lagusson informed. "There is?" Rias asked, furrowing her brow. Given everything she had experienced, she wasn't sure if this would be pleasant or not. Both heads of Lagusson nodded. "I come bearing a request. In light of the recent tension our kind has brought to your own and others, our ruler would like to speak to you." Sona narrowed her eyes and Aquino rose an eyebrow. Surzek looked to Serafal, who was suddenly more serious than normal. "Where and when would this meeting take place?" Serafal asked with a wary frown. "Right now," Lagusson said, head tilting up to look behind the devils. They were all too aware of the sound of a portal opening, turning to see a gray, yellow vortex. And from it emerged 3 figures. Rias recognized all 3 of them instantly. Yog-Sothoth looked as smug and amused as ever, while Yidra had her mask between patience and disinterest. And finally, "Issei? Yo," he greeted with a smile. 1 week later. "Here is your soda, master." Issei smiled and took the offered glass of ice and pop. "Thank you, Ectosa." The daughter of Cthulhu bowed elegantly. She, like her sister, was currently in human form and wearing maid outfits that were sexy but still covering enough to be called clothing. Albeit, the tops were shoulderless, giving him a prime view of their breasts. Ignoring the legs, their human forms looked almost identical to their true selves, except their skin was a dark tan instead of purple, their white hair was less unnatural looking and reminded him of Kaniko's, and they traded in their skimpy jewelry for the maid outfits. Complete with chokers that had a blank medallion on them, reserved for when he had a proper symbol or seal associated with himself. "Cthulhu, that isn't how you prepare a bed." "Sorry, Miss Asia," the other twin apologized, causing Issei to glance at the open door to the eldritch guest bedroom, aka Asia's room. "That's all right. Here, let me show you," Asia said with an encouraging smile. It had been a week since everything happened. After some assurances, the twins gradually stopped being actively afraid of Aza and settled into the roles of being maids. Asia had taken it upon herself to help teach them all the little things they'd need to know. How to make a bed, use a vacuum cleaner, do laundry, etc. They had taken to it rather quickly, likely wanting to prove useful to avoid being sent back to Jupiter. That said, Issei glanced to Ectosa, who was now standing beside his chair, staring keenly ahead at nothing and actually nothing. He wasn't sure how to describe it, but he knew she wasn't staring at something only Eldritch could see. Her eyes were literally not looking at anything but the wall. "You know you can relax a bit, right?" Issei offered in concern. "Master?" Ectosa asked curiously, looking down at him with inquisitive red eyes. "You feel a bit wound up. You can relax and take a break if you want," Issei suggested. "You do not need to be concerned, Master, but thank you," Ectosa said with a smile. "But if your order still stands, may I return to my room?" Issei nodded, watching with confused amusement as she went over to his bed and then effortlessly slid under it. Aza, bless her, had decided that his servants should have a bedroom right below his bed, and made some shadowy pocket space for them to slip into. He idly wondered what was even in that room, but was more concerned with the twins themselves. All they do is maid stuff and then go to their room. With how much they wanted out, you'd think they'd be feeling a bit cooped up. "Oh, what a good and adorable kungur you are." Issei looked forward, unsurprised to see that Yog was sitting on his desk, right in front of him with her legs open. "You know, if you were wearing a skirt, I'd be able to see your panties." Bold to assume I wear any, Yog said with a chuckle. Why, disappointed by that, issei? No, just starting to think you picked that outfit just for this moment, issei remarked, getting chuckles from the time god. So, you got some advice about the twins? Issei, they already told you, they will do what you say and nothing else, Yog reminded coyly. They meant that literally. A bit too literally, issei remarked in exasperation. Look, I know they're not normal people, but you're worried they'll stress too much about not getting in trouble, Yog remarked. Issei, I will say this is actually a good thing for them. That said, it is sweet that you're not keeping them on a short leash. It's just, I haven't seen these troublemakers everyone talks about them being, issei said with a frown. I'll show you what they used to be like another time, Yog assured. Look, they know this is their last chance to avoid a much longer sentence. Don't be afraid to punish them when they do mess up, and they'll learn like a fish learning to fly. Is that an Eldritch or evolution reference? Issei asked with a raised eyebrow. So, did you stop by for anything else? Nope. Yog answered with a beaming smile. Can't a Grand Vizier want to spend some time with her Sultan? That's not any of your titles, is it? Issei guessed with a furrowed brow. No, but it is fitting. I'm basically Azathoth's time-traveling right hand, Yog pointed out. Can't really argue with that, issei conceded slowly. Yog, can you be serious with me for a moment? Yog sat up straighter, her jovial expression slipping away. Yes. And I already know you have only one possible question right now, she said sincerely. You're fully starting to accept this notion of being our king. That we don't care that you're more on the human end of power for now. So you want to know, what do we expect of you? What do I expect of you? Issei was surprised only for a moment before chuckling. Yeah, I guess you already saw that coming. Kungur, Yog said firmly. I am time. I know everything that might happen, with only certain entities able to hide from my sight over the timeline. And I can safely tell you how time sees the difference between mortals, immortals, and eternals. You mean besides living longer? Issei asked rhetorically. Yog didn't even smile, didn't even look amused. She just placed her sword before her and leaned on it as if it were a staff. Tell me, Kungur? Do you know what a decision is? I mean what it actually, really is? Are we getting into the topic of free will? I inquired with a frown. It's an equation. Or, more accurately, it's the result of an equation, Yog explained. Mortals are entirely limited by the information they can obtain. This limitation to their understanding is what allows them to make so many varying answers. The slightest, most unimportant information can change the result. Immortals have more fixed points in their variables. Only under certain circumstances will their answer vary outside their normal parameters. Okay, should I guess that Eternals are entirely fixed in their equations? Issei guessed with a furrowed brow. Yes. The decisions might not always make sense, but there are no true variables in our timelines. We might choose a different time or place to do something, but most often, we will do it all the same. Such as Azathoth turning you into an Eldritch and our Kungur. There is no reality where she does anything else. She would never stop waiting on you, never resent you, never truly try to force you, and never ever do anything to harm you, Yog explained. Issei was prepared to make a joke about Azza hurting him in pleasant ways. Not the masochistic sense so much as nails claws at his back. But the sheer seriousness of Yog kept his humor at bay. You make it seem like mortals have free will and we don't. No, we do. I randomly hop into other timelines to search for random patterns, Yog answered. The issue we have here, issei, is that you're equating free will with having multiple branches in the timelines. I mean, yeah. If timelines exist, that means every decision has an impact, right? Issei questioned. Ripple effects and all that? Despite what Ray Bradbury claims, no. It's not that simple, Yog said, tapping her sword. Issei raised an eyebrow as 3 lines of ethereal light appeared in the air. Yog pointed to the middle one. One butterfly flaps its wing an extra time. Okay? Issei answered questioningly, seeing nothing happening. A third, a fourth, a fifth, Yog continued, but nothing happened. One more. Now one finally branched off. Issei raised an eyebrow at her and the display. Okay, 6 a special number? No. A child saw the butterfly, and the beautiful wings inspired them to become one of the greatest painters the world has ever known, Yog explained. There are a million changes you can make to a timeline, but they won't alter it unless they are the right changes. So, mortals are easily changed by random things, but no one cares if your dog chases its tail for the day instead of gnawing a chew toy, Issei mused. A good way of thinking about it, Yog said, looking at the lines. Mortals see linear time like tree branches, diverging from different points as the branches expand. I see it more, well, this is a simplified way of how I see it. She tapped her staff against and the lights reshaped into a large pattern of interconnecting lines. It wasn't branches, more like a system of cracks that the light was forcing its way through. Slightly lost, but I think I almost get it? Issei mused. A future can have multiple pasts. Different events can lead to the same outcome. For instance, there is a timeline where the entire history of humans is the same, but they are descended from rodents instead of apes, Yog explained. There's a joke there, Issei muttered thoughtfully. Despite subtle differences, the entire timeline is virtually identical, Yog explained. Now, the timeline where you have primate humans and rodent humans at the same time? Short of a quick genocide by either side, those paths have no chance of reaching the path of this timeline. Okay, I'm following you. I think. Maybe more than I should be able to, Issei muttered. But devils seem to be like normal people, personality-wise, so why do they have fewer variables? Issei, most mortals live with a great deal of confusion and uncertainty their entire lives. Most of the supernatural world knows about the gods, afterlives, and much more. They have fewer questions and therefore are less likely to make different decisions in a given situation. For instance? Issei asked curiously. There is no reality in which you didn't help Kaneko Tujo, Yog explained bluntly, dismissing the cracks of timelines. The only variable was when and who had the nerve to ask you. Usually, it was Aquino or Rias. Often around the time it happened anyway. But someone was always going to ask at some point. And I was always going to say yes, Issei concluded. Yog nodded meaningfully. In the grand schemes? For mortals, each choice on its own has very little influence over reality. The opposite is true for Eldritch. We are who we are. As there are much fewer potential outcomes, each decision we make carries greater weight. Okay. That's good to know, but I'm not sure how that pertains to my question. Issei asked in bewilderment. Because you were always going to have this moment when it began to sink in and stick. The biggest question was when you would, Yog explained. I expect you to do what you want to do. Right and wrong don't apply to our mindset. If I were to save someone in the timeline, it's because I want to. Why I want to is the variable. Is this person important? Am I just feeling like taking pity on a mortal whose death wouldn't change anything important? Or perhaps I want them to meet a crueler fate. Something far more convoluted and nonsensical? Who knows? The point is, an Eldritch very rarely ever faces the issue of doing anything they don't want to do. Issei stared at her, taking that in. It made a lot of sense. Eldritch largely did what they wanted. Well, the gods did. That, Yog said with a hum, already knowing what he was about to ask. What about the lesser Eldritch, who have to obey the gods? Our servants and spawnlings? The answer is simple, even if they don't like it, they still want to do it. Because they would rather obey than face the consequences. And to an Eldritch, not wanting to commit an alternative action is the same as wanting to the intended action. So it's not just hedonism or something like it, Issei muttered. So, you're telling me to do what I want? Yog dropped her serious look and returned to her teasing look. Or do who you want. After all, you're already building a good harem. Aza at the head with the twins, Aika, and Asia. Aika is the family dog at most. Issei spat out in annoyance. Oh, how kinky. Don't be surprised if she has dog ears and tails with a collar next time you use her, Yog said with a chuckle. But I'm not joking, she will be your dog if you want her to. Yes. I know. It's tempting on the face of it. Issei said with a hand over his face. May I ask why you have an issue with her? Yog asked curiously. I'm deliberately not looking ahead for this, I want to hear it myself. 2 reasons. 1, she is as perverted as I ever was, if not worse, but got a pass most of the time because she's a girl, Issei said in annoyance. 2nd, I feel like having her in a harem is to risk her usurping it from you. Yog blinked, stroking her chin in consideration. You know, with anyone but you might actually have a point. She definitely had some potential timelines for having a lesbian harem before you accepted Oz's offer. And now? Issei asked with a head tilt. Again, she is your dog if you want her, Yog repeated blankly. Issei, that girl is happy, on principle to let you fuck her, kill her, and resurrect her to fuck her again. Okay, not what I had planned, Issei said in surprise. So, my foolishly wise king, what do you want to do? Yog asked encouragingly. You already know, don't you? Issei asked, more amused than annoyed. Yog smiled. You are who you are, Issei. There are a lot of variables to you still, but some things are just in your nature. Issei shook his head. Did you already set everything up? Issei, you insult me, Yog said in mock offense. I already did all that when we sent the devils home. Granted, I did it a few minutes ago when you weren't looking. Issei's eyebrow twitched. I feel like we've had this conversation several times already. Yog looked sheepish. Yog just grinned mysteriously. Issei sighed and rose from his seat. Asia, girls. I'm heading out for a bit. Have a good time with Ectosa and cthulhu. Okay, have a good time. Asia called back with a smile. I wonder where he's going. 1 week earlier. Who is this? Lord Citri asked with a frown. Issei hoyudo, sona ansveret uneasili. He's Dash. My lord, Lagasan greeted, trotting around the devils to approach the eldritch trio. Oh, hey. Lagu, right? Issei greeted. Thanks for guarding everybody home. It was no trouble. The crawling chaos has taken her mischief elsewhere, Lagasan said, both his human and horse head bowing to the eldritch gods. I'm guessing Yog got you to deliver this message too, he asked, giving Yog a knowing look. The second one did, Lagasan mused. I take it these were 2 separate requests? It was more convenient that way, Yog said pridefully. Do you have any more use of me, outer ones? Lagushum kuesten idly. Nah. We're good, Issei assured with a nod. Lagasan nodded his luminous head, disappearing as his body turned into a sulfuric, putrid mist. Sorry about all that, Issei said with a smile to the devils. Now, I think we need to talk. A pin could have dropped and the sound would have echoed over the area. Talk. The eldritch wanted to talk. Surzex eyed the young man before him, so casually speaking with and standing alongside an entity that could shatter reality. Issei Hayadu. What a strange being. Supposedly human, a pervert, seemingly courting Azathoth herself, and claimed to have no ulterior motive when he helped Rias. So in what role was Issei Hayadu here then? A diplomat from the Eldritch, a friend of Rias and the others, the lover of Azathoth? I suppose the dialogue is well overdue, Surzex granted, glancing to Seraphal who nodded with an unusually serious look about her. Good, Issei said as he leaned to the side, smiling at the 2 heiresses. Rias, Sona? Everyone okay since last time? Thanks to you, yes, Sona admitted evenly. Issei, not to sound rude, but what is this about? Rias asked, crossing her arms and cocking her head. Well, we made a mess and I figure we should at least talk about it, Issei mused as he approached with Yog and Yid trailing behind him. Everyone minus Rias and Sona tensed for a moment as Issei stopped and started looking between Surzex and Zeoticus curiously. Sorry, I'd rather not get this wrong. Which one of you is the Duke and which one is the Satan? Somewhat taken aback by the situation, father and son shared a look. I am the reigning Lucifer, Surzex answered cautiously. This is my father, Duke Zeoticus Gremory. Good to meet both of you, he said before looking at Venelana. And you are Rias's sister? Venelana allowed herself to smile coyly at that. Well, aren't you a charmer, young man? I happen to be her mother, Venelana, she explained in amusement. Moth Dash? Issei looked stunned by that, looking to Rias. What? She asked with a sweat drop. Nothing, just, imagining you in a few more years, Issei admitted shamelessly before turning to Sona's parents. And since I know the other Satan is Sona's sister, you must be the prince and princess? I am Caius, and my wife, Nelemia, Lord Citri answered warily as he eyed the young man. Nice to meet you all and sorry we barged in like this, Issei answered. Yes, Zeoticus said, looking toward the eldritch gods. He knew what they were, but not exactly who. And these are? I suppose I have never used this form when meeting with devils and the like, Yydra mused aloud to herself. She's the dream witch, Rias introduced, nodding to Yydra, who returned the gesture. The other one is... Rias paused, considering the proper epithet for Yog. The gate and the key, Sona supplied simply. Yog chuckled at some suspicious but uncertain reactions. I'm the outer god of time, Yog-Sothoth. That certainly got some startled, grim looks. Was there any way to avoid freaking them out? Issei asked idly to Yog. Yog shook her head with a smirk. Not many, no. Figures, Issei mused, rubbing his head. Issei, Rias spoke up. You said you wanted to talk. Right. Just wanted to make sure we all knew each other, Issei said as he rejoined Yidra and Yog. Now, where to start? Kungur, allow me, Yidra requested. Floor is yours, Yid, Issei granted, prompting her to step forward. Lucifer, Leviathan, noble devils. We wish to discuss the disruptions the Eldritch faction has caused for the rest of Earth's supernatural communities, Yidra explained diplomatically. Both Satans shared a look. There wasn't really a choice. Refusing the Eldritch couldn't end well. We'd be honored, of course, Surzex said neutrally. If you had sent word, we would have been better prepared to receive you. No, you wouldn't have, Yog said wryly. Seraphal raised an eyebrow but didn't dare to inquire what that meant. Should we be expecting your queen to join us? No, it's just us this time, Yog said with a playful smile. Though, Yidra and I are mainly here for support. This is Issei's show. Seraphal furrowed her brow. I see. Should we take this inside? I mean, that'd be nice, but I'm not sure you'd all be comfortable with that, Issei said, sheepish but knowing. I figured you would all sleep easier knowing the Eldritch were never actually in your home. That surprised everyone except Rias and Sona. But they were thankful for it nonetheless. Look, you mind if I be blunt? Issei requested, seeing this was going nowhere. By all means, Seraphal answered with a nod. The devils and everyone else ran off to their home realms because Azza showed up and more of the Eldritch faction started showing up. You were afraid we'd take over or just destroy the world, right? Issei summarized. Seraphal nodded. More so the latter than the former. Well, I'm here to say you don't have to worry about that, Issei offered freely. Azza and the others aren't planning on conquering anything. There's a special agreement around Earth and Yidra here helps keep it going. No one is allowed to claim ownership of the entire planet. Too many different Eldritch have claims here, live here, or are sealed here, Yidra elaborated. Thus, Earth is considered a neutral hub that all Eldritch are welcome to. The outer gods simply rarely had reasons to gather here. Surzex raised an eyebrow. So you can ensure that the Eldritch faction, for the foreseeable future, will not allow the Earth to be conquered. Correct, Yog answered with a hum. But now they're wondering about the more concerning issue. After all, it's easier to destroy a planet than it is to conquer it. Or any of their realms. The devils all looked uneasy at that as Issei held up his hands in assurance. Don't worry. We're going to do everything we can to keep the other Eldritch from causing any extinction-level events. I still live there, after all. You keep saying we, Surzex observed. Tell us, how do you intend to ensure that? Is the Demon Sultana willing to indulge your desires that much? Pfft, indulge, Yog repeated with a snicker. Even Yidra had to cover her mouth to hide a chuckle. Azza and the others came here because of me. I'm not willing to leave Earth, so I figured the least I should do is try to clear the air between the Eldritch and everyone. That I should let everyone know they can go back to Earth if they want. And if any of ours causes too much trouble, I'll personally make sure that we'll help take care of it. Seraphal raised an eyebrow. I know you have powers, but are you sure you can guarantee that? Issei idly reached up to scratch the side of his head, and revealed the gauntlet of Drag as he did. I'm sure I'll figure something out. Is that what I think it is? Seraphal asked in surprise. The gauntlet of the Red Dragon Emperor, Surzex observed. So, you were human. Mostly still am, Issei answered with a smile. Our Kungur isn't the type to sit back and let everyone else handle things for him, Yog said in amusement. He's very hands-on, as the Queen knows and appreciates. Issei gave Yog a black stare. You had to steal the chance for me to say that, didn't you? Guilty, Yog said with a wink. I have heard of that title being passed around cults lately, Kungur. What is it? Surzex inquired with suspicion. Brother, Rias spoke up as she stepped closer, glancing at Issei. I believe he's effectively the king of the Eldritch. Yog and Yidra lost all amusement now while Issei looked sheepish. Effectively? Yidra repeated blankly. She meant no offense to your queen, Seraphal said quickly, fearing for Rias's sanity and existence. Oh, it's not that, Issei said, feeling weird to openly say he was king of anything. It's just? What exactly did you think the title Kungur meant, little devils? Yog asked with a raised eyebrow. Surzex stiffened, as did most others. You're saying that? The Eldritch already see him as their king, Sona finished with a frown. She and Rias had been too cautious in their estimation. They thought that Issei had informal power at most, not that a being like Azathoth would go as far as to make him actual royalty among the Eldritch divinities, which explained a lot. The Eldritch gods and creatures they had met, they hadn't been treating Issei with respect because of the Demon Sultana. They had been doing it because Issei was in fact the king of the Eldritch. Indeed they do, devils of Citri and Gremory, Drake spoke up, the jewel of the gauntlet glowing. Surzex narrowed his eyes. Drake, the red dragon of domination. It's been a few hosts since I've seen you, Satan of Ruin, Drake greeted. You should listen to this one. Despite being touched by the Eldritch dash. He does most of the touching, Yogg corrected with a snort. And my wielder, he is a supremely peaceful and well-meaning soul so far. Your sister and her companions have no doubt told you all of his attempt to, and I quote, not be an asshole, Drake finished off. Many blinked at the surprising shift to crass language, but something was amusing about the way Drake said it. Issei mock glared at the gauntlet. Look, just because the Queen of the Universe has the eternal hots for me doesn't mean I need to be, well, an ass about it. Seraphal hummed as she looked between the group before clearing her throat. So, in summary, you are here to assure us that you all mean no harm, despite what's happened, and you are willing to help us deal with any Eldritch incidents, shall we say. Yeah, that's pretty much it, Issei answered with a shrug. That is rather generous of you, Surzex admitted. But I hope you understand many will be reluctant to return. I know, Issei acknowledged casually. But I figured I should at least make the offer. There was a pause. Literally. Issei blinked as everything turned gray, glancing at Yogg. There a reason you stopped time, he asked before looking to Yid, who was also grayed out. She's frozen too? Things just got interesting, Yogg answered with a hum. What do you mean? Issei questioned suspiciously. They're about to bring up the subject of an alliance, Yogg explained. Perhaps not a full alliance, but at least a pact of some sort. Shit. I do not have enough diplomat vocab to even try that, Issei said with a groan. Yogg rolled her eyes playfully. That's not the concern. You, being you, were most likely going to give it to them free of charge. I agree with the time goddess's assessment, Drake commented. Was wondering if that level of time stopping would work on you with Issei excluded, Yogg observed in idle interest. Okay, probably. But would that be a bad thing? Issei asked, really wish he had more time to think about this. Which he did, seeing his time was stopped. Not really, Yogg answered idly. But like I said before, this is the moment you start to accept that you are the king of the Eldritch gods. And this will be your first act. So I want you to be sure what you want to do. Issei looked thoughtful before making up his mind. Unstop time, I know how I'm doing this. Yogg smiled. So you do. Time unfroze. Perhaps another offer should be proposed, Surzex stated, glancing at Seraphal. She looked directly at Issei. Kungur of the Eldritch, what are the possibilities of an alliance between our factions? At the moment? None, really, Issei answered casually. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to it, but… Yes? Seraphal encouraged curiously. I know nothing about your faction. Or any other faction. I've only known my own for less than a month. Issei pointed out. So I can't really make a choice like that when I have no idea how that'll affect everything. Yogg looked pleasantly surprised by this outcome. Literally the smartest option he would have considered, Yogg muttered under her breath while looking at the timelines. That said, I don't see why we can't be on good speaking terms. And if you want a way to easily contact me or Aza, Issei glanced to Rias and Sona. I am still going to school. Sona raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting we act as ambassadors to you from the devil factions? Issei shrugged. I mean, unless you have a better suggestion? Pardon me, your majesty, Venelana spoke up respectfully, everyone turning to her in surprise. Issei was still not used to being addressed like that. But is it possible there are some ulterior motives to wanting our daughters to return? She asked with a knowing look. No. Getting the most beautiful girls back at my school is purely a bonus, Issei answered confidently. Rias blinked, surprised not by the compliment, but that she actually believed him. She couldn't see a single lie on Issei's face. Seraphal looked at her parents, and Surzex's. They were somewhat uneasy about this suggestion, but only slightly. We'll need time to consider dash. I accept, Sona said bluntly. Sona? Seraphal turned in shock and protest. Sister, Issei Hayadu is, first and foremost, one of the biggest perverts I have ever heard of. So much so that he has, apparently, been more interested in having sex with the Eldritch Queen than realizing he is the ruler of the most powerful faction in reality, or that he possesses a Longinus-class sacred gear, Sona pointed out bluntly. Her parents stiffened, glancing at said pervert. Issei, however, just nodded. Not a lie in there so far. Yet he is being surprisingly rational and practical, Sona continued. And he has proven sincerely altruistic. She's right, Rias agreed with a smile. If Issei says it's safe, he's given me every reason to believe him. If you are an ambassador to the Sultan and Sultana, any attack on you would be considered an insult to both of them, Yidra stated. You have my word that they and their servants will have their sanity protected and healed. The healed part is somewhat concerning, Zioticus said idly. But I can see our daughters have made up their own minds. Lord Citri sighed and nodded. Though, it might be hard to arrange their return after everything. Leave that to me, Yog said with a smirk. I'll just change some things in the timeline, making it seem like you were on a field trip or were all sick and in quarantine for a while. Something like that. By the time you come back, no one will question why you all came back. I'll try to make sure she tells you the cover story, instead of making you wing it, Issei promised, somewhat exasperated. Still, I think that's everything we need to talk about? I believe so, Serafal said with a diplomatic smile. Thank you for your time and consideration, Kungur. No problem, Leviathan, Issei assured, looking at Rias and Sona. See you whenever you come back, ladies. Say hi to Aquino, Kaneko, and the rest for me. With that, the trio left through a portal formed by Yog. All of the devils visibly relaxed once they had left. Well, it seems we do live in interesting times, Zioticus remarked warily, looking at his daughter. So, was there another reason why you were so opposed to the arrangement to Riser? Father, don't get any ideas, please, Rias said with a sigh. Though, in hindsight, I wish we hadn't decided to wait until we were home to tell everything beyond the basics of what happened. We hardly expected him to show up with a declaration of peace, Sona said idly. So, you both knew he was the Eldritch King? Surzex asked curiously. Well, we didn't know he was literally it, but... Rias trailed off for a moment. The Eldritch all defer to him, even the outer gods, Sona explained. As for the demon Sultana, she's honestly in love with him, Rias answered. It's almost terrifying how normal they seem as a couple. Affectionate, a bit blunt with their flirting, but otherwise normal. So this entire ordeal is everyone just overreacting to a goddess falling in love and wanting to be with her lover, Venelana observed in amusement. But Sona, are you sure about this? Serafal asked insistently, gabbing onto Sona's shoulders. Just being around the Eldritch Queen could hurt your sanity if she lost control. I heard what happened to Kaneko. Yes, and yet, I've kept track. No student has gone insane despite many having annoyed her while she's pretending to be a student, Sona answered reassuringly. I wouldn't go as far as to say that Issei can control her, but he can definitely keep her calm. And Issei can readily call on the Dream Witch if anything should go amiss. Serafal looked between pouting and growling. Fine. But you're not going back for a month. 3 days, Sona counter-offered. A week, Surzex said with a smile. Let's give everything a chance to calm down and everyone to relax. I suppose we should. Besides, it's not bad to be home for a bit, Rias agreed, getting a nod of acceptance from Sona. Now we just need to explain this to the others. You know Aquino is going to have a field day with this, Sona pointed out knowingly. I'm perfectly aware. Meanwhile. Phew, I'm glad that's done, Issei said as they reappeared in his room. Asia, we're back. A blonde head popped out of the closet door, looking at him in surprise. Already? Yeah, it didn't take too long, Issei assured, missing how Yog was giving Asia a shushing gesture. Aza show back up yet? No, she's still out with Lady Shub, Asia answered, tilting her head. May I ask what they're doing? She looked rather excited when she left. Shub is talking sense into her, or as much as she can, Yog answered awkwardly. What is going on and why wasn't I told? Issei asked, feeling alarmed. 'Cause this feels more like an Aza thing, not a Queen Aza thing. It's Aza trying to do an Aza thing by justifying it as a Queen Aza thing, Yog elaborated with a chuckle. Though I must say, I was rather impressed with your first try at doing a King Issei thing. Knew you were going to turn that on me the moment I said it, Issei said in acceptance. Should I be worried or preparing for anything? Yog looked thoughtful. Not really. Shub is the best one for this. It's kind of her topic of expertise. She trailed off with a distant look. Expertise? Wait, was Aza trying to adopt a kid behind my back? Issei realized in alarm. Oh my. Asia said in surprise. Do I need to move to another room? So the child will be next to this room? Asia, you're an angel, but not helping, Issei said quickly. And the baby wouldn't fit in there anyway, Yog commented honestly. Yog, explain, now, Issei said bluntly. Yog only looked slightly amused by their reaction this time. There's an orphaned eldritch, an unhatched baby outer god. It'll be born within this century. Sooner if you take it on as a servant. Aza was hoping it might be a good way to practice for the real thing. Shub knows it's far too soon for you to be considering that, so she's talking Aza out of it. Okay, I appreciate that, Issei said, still taking that one in. This egg. It's going to be all right, right? Oh yes. Cass is keeping an eye out for potential parents to take the lunatic in. It's a very patient baby, Yog assured. Asia spoke up, eyes tinged with concern and sympathy. May I ask, Lady Yog? How did this one become an orphan? Aren't eldritch eternal? Yes, but we can be out of commission for a long time if killed, Yog reminded. As for this one, it's hard for most to say. Eldritch have a lot of ways to reproduce. Sometimes we accidentally make children, or we fight and our severed body parts will come together into something new. And some, well, just don't care for being parents. Personal experience? Issei asked, noting a tone to Yog that was between bitter and annoyed. Let's just say there's a reason I don't visit my parents. You'll find out eventually, Yog answered idly. Deciding to change the subject, he brought the topic back to their meeting with the devils. So, Rias and Sona. When are they coming back? Oh, they decided to wait a week, spend some time in the underworld, Yog answered with a smile. So, we both know your ulterior motives for Rias, but why did you throw Sona in too? Issei smiled. Well, I got the feeling that neither really wanted to leave like that, so I thought I'd give them an easy excuse to come back if they wanted. Still, makes me feel a bit stupid. If I thought to do this earlier, we might have saved them that fight on the train. Yes, if you thought about going to talk to the devils back when you still thought that your title of Kungur was ceremonial at best, Yog retorted sarcastically. Issei, for an eldritch, you caught on very fast. For a non-eldritch, you still caught on pretty quick. I'll have to take your word for it, Issei mused. They all paused as there was a ring at the doorbell. Wonder who that is, Issei commented but made no move to answer it, knowing his parents were home. Yog tilted her head. Your mother's coming. Right as she said that there was a knock at the door. Issei? There are some classmates here to see you, his mother informed with a bewildered voice. CLA, I'll be right down, Mom. Issei answered, turning to an impish Yog. You took us back in time for that meeting, didn't you? Yep. It made everything a lot smoother and easier to deal with, Yog assured. Oh damn, no wonder they were worried. They just got off the train after all that, and then we showed up like that. Issei said with a groan. Relax. There would have been more panic if we waited or gave them a heads up, Yog assured. Now best hurry before I have to start slowing down time for us to have a longer conversation. Issei didn't know if wanted to thank Yog or flip her off, ultimately sighing as he headed out the door. His mother was still there. Hey, Mom. Who is it? I'm guessing not the guys. Oh, they're not guys of any kind, his mother said, eyeing Issei with narrowed eyes. Issei, have you been up to anything? Nothing you're imagining, Issei said with a sigh as he headed down the stairs to the front door. He opened it and blinked at the very surprising sight. He wasn't too surprised by the presence of Akino, smiling her very era smile at him as she looked away from whatever conversation she had been having. It was her partner that got his surprise, if only because she was with Akino, to begin with. Aza, he greeted in surprise. The Eldritch Queen grinned. Issei, I think I made a friend today. The feeling is mutual, Aza, Akino said with a giggle. Yog blinked as she observed the encounter from up in the bedroom. I didn't see that one coming. So this is your room, Akino said coyly as she took a seat in his chair. I'm almost disappointed. No sexy posters or figurines? The idea of Akino being in his room carried many lewd thoughts, multiplied by the fact that she and Aza were apparently friends now. So, how did you two meet? Issei asked curiously as Aza took a seat on the bed. Well, after everything was said and done, I eagerly volunteered to be the first diplomat to come and formally speak to you, O great and mighty king of the Eldritch, Akino said with a giggle. Still working on the great and mighty part, Issei said sheepishly. I realized what you were up to with Yog and Yidra, so I decided to meet this Akino, Aza said with a giggle of her own. We hit it off instantly and she's told me many interesting things. Issei looked at Akino suspiciously. Are you trying to corrupt her? Because I promise you, she already is. She's in love with me, after all. Yes, but I thought she might want more native advice on what a man like you might enjoy, Akino said, cupping her cheek with half-lidded eyes. And she's told me all about what you've already taught her, albeit, vaguely, in regards to the shapeshifting. I must say, Issei, I didn't peg you as that type. First off, no one pegs me period, Issei said blankly. Secondly, what type? Akino just giggled. Don't worry, beloved, she means it in a good way, Aza assured. Speaking of such things, Akino told me she made a certain promise to you. HM? Oh, right, that, Issei recalled with a slight blush. And that you told her you'd have to do it with me first, Aza said meaningfully. Issei looked between the two. I have two ideas about where this is going. Aza is going to give you a tit job tonight, Akino said, crossing her arms under her bosom and reclining slightly. And after that, well, by your own terms you're free to call in that promise. Any time and, if you feel frisky, anywhere. Issei swallowed. Duly noted, and I definitely will do that. But, he paused to raise an eyebrow. Is there anything official to talk about, you being the diplomat and all? Business before pleasure then, Akino teased. Well, we were hoping to know the official backstory we all have for why we were gone. Right, Issei murmured, glancing up at nothing. Yog? To their collective surprise, there was a knock at the door, which promptly opened to reveal another time goddess. Yad? Issei greeted in surprise. I decided to handle this, lest the bigger key let them fend for themselves, Yad informed, walking over to an Olish Akino, handing her a folder. Please give this to Citri and Gremory. Officially, the student council were suspected but cleared of having a rare virus. As for your mistress and fellow servants? The records show that Rias Gremory went to visit a relative for the weekend and invited the whole club to come along. Your flight home was cancelled and this was the soonest you could return. Oh. Thank you. Akino answered. You're welcome, Yad answered flatly, looking at Aza and Issei. Would that be all, Lady Aza, Lord Issei? No, that will be all, Aza assured with a dismissive wave. Thanks, Yad, Issei said with a smile. Find some time to take a break, you deserve it. Yog takes enough breaks for us both, Yad informed with the barest of smiles. But I appreciate the sentiment. With that, she left just as she came. I'm sorry, who was that? I don't believe I met her, Akino asked curiously. Yad Thatig, Issei answered casually. The door opened, Yad popping in her head with a head tilt. Sorry, still getting that down, Issei said apologetically. Yad looked unbothered and left. Let's just call her Yog's little sister. Ah, so she's also a time eldritch? Akino questioned curiously. Yes, but she works in the finer details while Yog is more big picture, Issei explained. And, Yad isn't a troll. Well, I'm glad we have that settled all the same, Akino said before turning unusually serious. As a more formal matter, Rias Gremory and Sona Citri are hoping there will be a mutual and open sharing of information about any problematic elements we know of, in our own faction or otherwise. Sounds good, Issei accepted, looking at Aza. Do we have anything for her yet? Nothing apocalyptic, Aza answered, tapping her foot in thought. The floor began to grow spiky green scales as she did. Issei paid it little mind, but Akino leaned away only slightly in surprise, eyeing the change like it might attack her. It wasn't an impossibility. Oh! Aza exclaimed, snapping her fingers, miniature suns appearing over her head before vanishing. I suppose we should tell you about the Eldritons. Eldritch, Titans? Akino repeated with a furrowed brow. The title was concerning but unfamiliar. This is the first I've heard of them too, Issei commented curiously. It's Eldritons, but, also, yes, they also go by that, Aza said, sounding more annoyed than anything. They're a group of younger eldritch gods. Or demigods, if you prefer. They're obsessed with the idea of overthrowing the outer gods. Issei and Akino shared looks of surprise. That sounds kind of important, Aza, Issei stated. There's an eldritch civil war, and no one on Earth even knew about it? Akino questioned, her worry growing already. They're not that big of a problem to us, Aza answered dismissively. They're weaker than elder gods, but they can take on hordes of the average eldritch. Honestly, your mistress could probably annihilate the weaker ones. True, if they work together, they can take on great old ones, but that still takes almost all of them. Akino tilted her head. Aza, I know you're literally mistress of reality, but you sound very dismissive of this group that's fighting against you. Aza grumbled. To the eldritch community, the Eldritons are a bunch of, what's the term humans use? Issei, what do you call someone that is trying to seem tough and cool? Sharpie? Cutty? Issei blinked and tried not to snort. Wait, you mean these are a bunch of edgy teenagers? Akino bit her cheek to stop from laughing. I see. I think I understand now. Do they even have a reason for trying to rebel? Aza sighed. For whatever reason, they're trying to go from what you would call blue-orange morality to black and white. And by that I mean, they've decided that we need to be overthrown because we're all evil, negligent, or both. Issei furrowed his brow. Wait a minute. My mind is already going toward eldritch morality. How the hell are they getting a more mortal morality when they're literal cosmic tentacle godbrats? Cosmic tentacle godbrats, Akino repeated in amusement. You certainly have a way with words, Kungur. Aza ignored the comment and answered. They have an easier time mingling safely among non-eldritch without causing insanity, so they're trying to mimic mortal morality to some degree. Still, I'm glad you warned us about them, Akino stated thoughtfully. Even if they're not a threat to you, if they start a battle on Earth with another eldritch. Right now they're recruiting, so they shouldn't try anything too stupid, Aza assured. Still, why hasn't anyone dealt with them yet? Akino asked curiously. You make it sound like it would be easy to destroy them. She already answered that, edgy teens, Issei predicted. It'd seem like overkill to bring the hammer down on them. Besides, if I haven't heard about them, I have to guess they haven't really done much damage. Not really, Aza answered with a shrug. Endangering entire planets of mortals is against their beliefs. They've killed a couple elder gods and maimed a great old one. The great old one laughed it off, and the elder gods were more confused by why they were attacked or just grumpy about needing new bodies. So, this is what rebellious teenage phases for eldritch are like, Akino murmured, glancing at Issei playfully. Hope you're prepared for that. Issei cleared his throat and changed the subject. So, are there any specific concerns you or the others had? Not yet, no, Akino assured. And do you have anything for us? Well, we should probably tell them about 2 new arrivals that will be at school, Issei suggested. 3, love, Aza corrected. 3? Oh, right, yeah. Issei acknowledged. I picked up some servants, and they'll be showing up at school. Oh? Do eldritch have something like the peerage system? Akino asked curiously. Have no idea what that is, Issei admitted freely. Anyway, while you're here, would you like anything to drink? Recognizing the lead-in for what it was, Akino smiled. I'll take a cup of tea if you happen to have anything. She stifled her tensing as 2 beings emerged from behind her, one holding a teacup and the other holding a teapot. They gracefully poured it even with their lower bodies slithering in front of her field of view. We hope it is to your liking, guest of the Kungur, the twins greeted in sync. They appear to be lamias, and maids at that, Akino said, looking the pair over with approval as she took a sip of the tea. You have excellent taste, Kungur. Issei chuckled sheepishly as he stood between the twins. These are Ictosa and Cthulhu, the twin daughters of Cthulhu. Akino sat a little straighter at that, nearly dropping her tea while looking at the 2 with renewed surprise. I see. I suppose I should offer my sympathies for your father being trapped. Father is not trapped, Ictosa correctly simply. He can escape whenever he desires. But if he does, humanity dies, Cthulhu added in. He is waiting for when he can do it without ending the world. Then we're most grateful for his patience, Akino said carefully, finding the 2 beauties a bit unnerving. Not in the eldritch sense, but something else. Don't mind them, they're still settling in, Issei assured. And the 3rd, well, she isn't an eldritch. Though she technically belongs to us. Akino raised an eyebrow as Issei went to his closet and knocked on the door. It opened and revealed a blonde girl in a nun outfit. Yes, Issei? Did you want anything? Asia greeted with a smile before she spotted Akino. Oh, we have company? Asia, you remember Rias Gremory? This is her, well, head servant is the easiest term. Her name is Akino Himejima. Akino? This is Asia Argento, Issei introduced. She was, well, it's fine, Issei, Asia assured with a small smile. I was with the fallen angels for a while. After some of them attacked Issei, they gave me to him and Aza as a form of appeasement. And she's been a delightful offering ever since, Aza said as a compliment. Akino stared for an instant. This girl appeared to be human, but she was quite calm and friendly around the literal ruler of the universe. Are you a cultist then? She asked curiously. Oh, no. I still consider myself a follower of God, Asia answered softly, though her words were tinged with sadness and not as certain as they used to be. Curiouser and curiouser, but Akino opted to not poke and prod there too much. Still, you have her living in your closet, Issei? How cruel of you, Akino teased. No, no. Issei and Aza gave me my own room and everything. Asia assured quickly in Issei's defense. Well, more like Aza made her a whole room for herself, Issei said, opening the door fully for Akino to get a good view. The half-fallen blinked as she stood up and walked over to the so-called closet. Oh my, Akino said with a devious look on her face as she looked at the colorless replica of Issei's bedroom. Oh, I see how it is now, Issei. What? How what is? He asked curiously. You have another bedroom, in your closet, for your servants, Akino summarized, cupping her face with half-lidded eyes. I see the Sultan has the first step to making his seraglio. Asia and Issei looked confused by the word. What's a seraglio? Asia repeated carefully. Aza, meanwhile, made a noise of contemplation. Well we would need to expand in that case. Expand for what? Issei asked, utterly lost now. Why, I'm shocked, King Issei, Akino said playfully. I thought you of all people would recognize a word for where one keeps their harem. Asia blushed instantly while Issei went wide-eyed. Wait, you mean one of those Arabian Issei stopped as Akino nodded repeatedly. I can't say I never wanted one. And you will need one, Aza said knowing, holding up her hands almost as if forming a picture frame, but with different fingers and a weird shape. Atha, no expanding. Yet, at least, Issei stipulated, wary of doing any large-scale reality warping with his parents in the house. Not to mention Akino or Asia. Don't worry, love, I'm just making some plans, Aza promised. Issei gave Akino a look. I should be annoyed at you for starting this, but I don't see a downside, he admitted freely. Akino just smiled. Well, if nothing else, I should take my leave. Oh, and Kaneko sends her regards. To you, specifically, Issei. I dare say our little kitten has taken a liking to you, she said with a smile. Kitten? Oh. Right, her, Aza recalled idly. I'm glad she's recovering at least. Akino didn't let her smile slip. Despite their newfound friendship, some part of her was still upset at Aza for nearly mind-breaking her dear friend. Same, Issei said with an honest smile. It was good to have you over, Akino. I guess I'll see you at school. Definitely, Akino promised as she headed to the door. She got to it before pausing for a long moment. She suddenly turned around and bowed deeply to Issei and Aza. I feel the urge to thank you both. What for this time? Aza asked, confused and curious. You already thanked Issei for saving all of you, and everything else. Akino stood up with a solemn look. Despite all the chaos, there was one good thing that emerged from all of this for Rias. She was in an arranged marriage. Rias was getting hitched? Issei asked in surprise. I'm confused. Isn't marriage a good thing? Aza asked curiously. She detested the idea of marrying her betrothed, Akino explained. Aza furrowed her brow. Then why would she marry him? Akino blinked as Issei looked at Aza in surprise. You don't know what an arranged marriage is, Aza? Not really? I thought all marriages were arranged. I mean, weddings don't just happen out of nowhere for mortals, right? Aza asked curiously. Issei looked from Aza to Akino to Asia and back to Akino. Okay, let me see if we can explain. 10 minutes later, Aza was scowling. That's dumb. Mortals are dumb. Why are they dumb? Aza asked flatly, hair weightlessly twirling in annoyance. What is the point of marrying someone you don't like? Alliances, normally, Akino supplied. Still, Rias was able to have the arrangement cancelled in light of your arrival, Aza. Good, Aza said with a nod, snorting harshly. The temperature in the room rose notably. The Lamia twins, to Issei's slight amusement, were actually enjoying the extra heat until Issei kissed Aza's temple, causing her and the atmosphere to calm down. Look, you don't have to thank us for this one. We did literally nothing. But I'm glad Rias doesn't have to be married to a guy she doesn't want. I expected as much. I just felt the need to say something, Akino answered with a smile. See you next time, O King and Queen of the Eldritch. With that, she left the room. They waited for several minutes until Issei could see her leaving out the house. Well, that was a very interesting conversation, Issei said, rubbing his head as he tried to take it all in. Issei, I fully support you getting a harem, but you better not accept any arranged marriages, Aza said, still irritated by the pure concept of what she had been introduced to. Issei wisely decided not to even try to explain to Aza that there were marriages of convenience and what they were. Don't worry. If I get any offers, I'll make sure I get a chance to date them before anything official happens. Aza just sighed. I know your soul, so I'll just leave those matters to you, she said as she sat on the couch. Oh great queen, what troubles you? Ectosa asked as they came to her side. Almighty Center, how may we help? Cthulhu questioned as they leaned closer. They were still scared of Azathoth, but seeing the demon Sultana in such a sad mood was surprising and concerning. If they were human, they would call it humanizing. As they were eldritch, they simply found Azza more relatable and understandable. It's fine, I just. Azza tried to wave away with a smile before dropping it as she looked at the ground. I've loved you for so long, issei. I know no one can force me to marry anyone, but the idea of being with someone else, anyone else. Issei silently took a seat next to Azza, placing a hand around her shoulder and pulling her to lean on his. This one bothers you, eh? He asked in sympathy. Azza nodded into his shoulder. Can I get rid of it? Issei paused and blinked, processing both the implication and how unbothered he was by that. I'd like to say yes, but you really shouldn't. You'd change, well, everything, Issei explained. Azza leaned into him more. I want to cuddle. Lots. We will, I promise, he said, kissing her on the cheek. But first dash. Azza blinked as Issei's stomach rumbled. Oh, right. You still need to eat. Another gurgling was heard, making them look at Asia, who blushed harshly. Looks like I'm not the only one, Issei noted with a smile, looking at the twins. You mind bringing us all something? Of course, master, they obeyed in tone. Bring yourselves something too, Issei called before they vanished. Your Seraglio will need a dining table, Azza mused absently. Asia, you don't need to just stand there. Issei has at least one free arm. Oh. I couldn't intrude on your time together, Asia said softly, glancing away and back to them nervously. Issei was not at all opposed to having the cute blonde join him, however, you don't have to do anything you don't want to, Asia. Asia stood there for a while before shyly taking a seat next to him. Not as close as Azza, but still very close. Issei smiled reassuringly at her and Asia smiled back in thanks. Azza just giggled and enjoyed her time in Issei's embrace. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, share and support the original writer. See you in the next video?